Clara Whitfield did not cry when Ethan Walker read her name from the paper, looked her up and down in the middle of that dusty road, and said it loud enough for half the town to hear, "You are not what I asked for." She did not flinch. She did not turn around. She picked up her single suitcase with both hands, held it against her chest, like it was the only thing in the world that still belonged to her, and she walked straight past him toward the house, because she had nowhere left to go. If this story already has your heart, subscribe to this channel right now, hit that notification bell so you never miss a single episode, and drop a comment below telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see exactly how far this story travels. Now let's go back to 1884 and find out what one quiet woman was truly made of. The stagecoach pulled into Millhaven, Montana on the third Tuesday of July, 1884, and it arrived 40 minutes late because one of the rear wheels had cracked crossing Broken Creek, and the driver had spent the better part of an hour cursing at it while his two passengers waited inside without speaking. Clara Whitfield was one of those passengers. She sat with her suitcase balanced across her knees and her hands folded on top of it, and she watched the dry Montana landscape move past the window, the way a person watches something they have already decided not to be afraid of. The other passenger, a heavy-set cattle broker named Orville Pence, had fallen asleep somewhere around the second hour and was still sleeping now. His hat pushed forward over his face, his boots leaving dust prints on the seat across from him. Clara did not mind the silence. She had grown up in silence. She had lived most of her 26 years in the quiet spaces between other people's words, learning to read the air in a room before she ever opened her mouth, learning to make herself useful before anyone thought to ask. She had answered Ethan Walker's advertisement 6 weeks ago on a cold Tuesday morning in St. Louis, sitting in the back office of a domestic service agency where she had worked for the past 3 years, cleaning houses and helping manage the affairs of families who needed someone reliable and asked no questions. The advertisement had been pinned to a board near the door. It was written in plain language. A widowed rancher in Montana. 2 children ages 7 and 9. Needs a capable woman to help manage a working ranch and provide a stable home for the children. Marriage offered in good faith. Respond in writing to Ethan Walker, Millhaven, Montana. She had read it 3 times. Then she had taken it down, folded it carefully, and put it in the pocket of her apron. That night, sitting in the single room she rented above a laundry on Clement Street, she had written her response at the small table by the window. She wrote honestly. She told him she had no experience with ranch work specifically, but that she was capable of hard work, that she was patient, that she did not scare easily, and that she understood what it meant to manage a household under difficult circumstances. She told him she was slender and not particularly strong in the physical sense, but that she had never once walked away from something that needed doing. She signed her name at the bottom and walked to the post office the following morning before she could talk herself out of it. His response came 3 weeks later. It was short. He said she sounded capable enough. He gave the date the stagecoach would arrive in Millhaven and told her there would be a wagon waiting. She had taken that as a yes. She had given notice at the agency, packed everything she owned into one suitcase, and boarded the eastbound train that connected to the Western Coach Line. She had exactly $4.30 to her name, a change of dress wrapped in brown paper, her mother's small silver thimble, and the folded letter from Ethan Walker that she carried in the left pocket of her traveling coat. She had told herself the whole way across 4 states that she was not running away. She was choosing something. That was different. By the time the stagecoach rolled into Millhaven and the driver climbed down and pulled open the door and said, "Last stop, ladies and gents," Clara had made her peace with whatever was waiting for her. She had not, however, made peace with the way Ethan Walker looked at her. He was standing on the far side of the road with his arms crossed and his hat pulled low, and he was watching the coach with the particular expression of a man who has been calculating odds and has just realized they have not worked out in his favor. He was taller than she had imagined, broad across the shoulders, with the kind of stillness that comes not from calm, but from years of keeping very strong feelings pressed down beneath the surface. His jaw was set. His eyes moved over her the moment she stepped down, and they moved over her quickly, the way a man appraises livestock at an auction, checking for something specific, not finding it, moving on. He had dark hair going gray at the temples. He wore a plain canvas work shirt and a brown leather vest and trail-worn boots. He held a folded piece of paper in his right hand, and Clara recognized the handwriting on the outside of it as her own. He walked toward her without hurrying. "Miss Whitfield," he said. "Yes," she said. "Mr. Walker." He looked at her for a long moment. He unfolded the letter. He looked at it. He looked back at her. And then he said it plainly, the way a man states a fact he finds inconvenient but cannot argue with, "You are not what I asked for." "I wrote you honestly," she said. "You wrote me that you were capable of hard work." He folded the letter again slowly. "My ranch is not a household in St. Louis, Miss Whitfield. My cattle don't care if you're patient. My fences don't care if you're gentle. I need someone who can pull weight, real weight." "I understand what you're saying." "Do you?" "Yes," she said. "You took one look at me and decided I can't do the work. You made that decision in about 30 seconds. Something shifted in his face, not softening exactly, more like a man who has been expecting a quiet argument and has been handed a different kind instead. He said nothing. "I'm not asking you to believe in me today," Clara said. "I'm asking you to give me the same time you'd give anyone else before you make up your mind." Ethan Walker looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked past her down the street, as if hoping the stagecoach might have carried a second more suitable woman who had simply been slow in stepping down. It had not. He turned back to her. "The wagon's at the end of the street," he said. "Your things fit in the back." He walked away without waiting to see if she would follow. She followed. They rode the 6 miles to the Walker Ranch without speaking, and Clara used that silence to study the land. She watched the way the grass bent in the afternoon wind. She watched the condition of the fence posts along the road, noting the ones that had been replaced recently and the ones that had not. She looked at the sky and at the dust on the road and at the way the wagon's wheels tracked through dried mud that had not yet been graded flat after the last rain. She was doing what she always did in a new place, building a picture of what was needed before she had to ask. The ranch itself came into view around a slow bend in the road, and what she saw was a solid main house that had once been well built and was now showing its years around the edges. A barn that needed paint on the south side. A kitchen garden that had gone to seed on the eastern end. 2 horses in the near paddock. A broken section of fence along the western pasture that had been propped with a piece of lumber rather than properly mended. None of this surprised her. The advertisement had said struggling. She had known what that word meant. What she had not expected were the children. They were standing on the front porch when the wagon pulled up, and they were standing very still the way children stand when they have been told to wait and have been waiting long enough that waiting has become a kind of armor. The boy was older 9, she guessed, with his father's dark eyes and a jaw that was already learning to set itself. The girl was younger, maybe 7, with pale hair, and the particular expression of a child who has learned not to expect things so that not having them hurts less. "Thomas," Ethan said as he stepped down from the wagon. "Lily, come say hello." Neither of them moved. "Thomas," Ethan said again, and there was a warning in it this time, quiet but clear. Thomas walked down the porch steps slowly, the way a boy walks when he is obeying without agreeing to. He stopped at the bottom of the steps and looked at Clara with his father's direct appraising eyes. "She doesn't look like she can do anything," he said. "Thomas." Ethan's voice went flat. "Papa said we were getting someone who could help with the cattle," Thomas said, still looking at Clara, not at his father. "She looks like the wind could knock her over." "Thomas, that is enough." Clara crouched down so she was level with the boy's eyes. He did not step back, which she noted. He was not afraid of her. He was testing her. That was something she understood. "You're right," she said. "I'm not built for cattle work, I know that. But I know how to do a lot of other things, and I'm willing to learn the rest. What's your name?" "He already said it," the boy said. "Thomas." "I know. I just wanted to hear you say it." He looked at her for a moment longer. He had not expected that. She could see it in the small hesitation before he spoke. "Thomas Walker," he said finally. "Nice to meet you, Thomas Walker." She stood up. She looked at the girl on the porch who had not come down. "And you must be Lily." The girl said nothing. She pressed herself slightly against the porch railing and looked at Clara with wide, careful eyes. "She don't talk much," Thomas said. "Not since Mama." "That's all right," Clara said. "I don't need her to talk. I just need her to know I'm not going to bother her." She turned back to the wagon and lifted her suitcase herself before Ethan could reach for it. She carried it up the porch steps, pausing beside Lily as she passed. The girl did not move. Clara did not stop. She simply said very quietly as she went past, "You don't have to like me. You don't have to talk to me. But I'm not going anywhere." She heard Lily exhale. She did not look back to see if it mattered. Inside the house, she set her suitcase down in the small room off the kitchen that Ethan showed her without ceremony. Bare walls, a narrow iron bed, a single window facing the barn, and she stood in the middle of it for exactly 1 minute. 1 minute to feel everything she needed to feel about arriving in a strange place where no one wanted her. 1 minute to be honest with herself about how tired she was, and how far she had come, and how uncertain all of it still was. Then she opened her suitcase, hung her second dress on the nail beside the window, set her mother's thimble on the windowsill, and went to find the kitchen. The kitchen told her everything she needed to know about the state of this household. The shelves were not bare, but they were disordered canned goods, stacked without thought, flour and salt and coffee, pushed to the back behind things that should have been in the cellar. The hearth was clean, which told her someone had been cooking, but the cookware was hung in the wrong order, and the cutting board had not been properly washed, and the back corner of the counter held a stack of papers and bills and ledger pages that had overflowed their place and were slowly taking over the table. She did not touch those papers. Not yet. She looked at what there was to cook with and what there was to cook, and she made supper. It was not fancy. Salt pork and dried beans with the last of a small onion and a pan of cornbread because she found meal in the back of the flour bin that was still good. She had supper on the table by the time the sun went down, and she called out from the kitchen door that it was ready without making a thing of it. Ethan came in from the barn and stopped just inside the kitchen doorway. He looked at the table. He looked at her. "You didn't have to do that tonight," he said. "It needed doing," she said. He sat down. Thomas came in a minute later and sat down without being asked, which told her the boy was hungry, even if he wasn't going to admit to being grateful. Lily appeared in the doorway and stood there long enough that Clara thought she might not come in at all. Then she walked to the table and sat in the chair nearest the door. No one said anything for a while. Then Thomas said with his mouth still half full, "It's better than Papa's." "Thomas," Ethan said. "It is," Thomas said. Ethan looked across the table at his son and then slowly at Clara. "It is," he said quietly. "Thank you." She nodded once and said nothing else. She had learned a long time ago that in a house full of grief, thank you is not the beginning of something. It is just a man who has been very tired being honest for one moment before he has to go back to being strong. She did not expect more than that. Not yet. In the days that followed, Clara learned the rhythms of the Walker Ranch, the way she had learned every house she had ever worked in, by watching before she moved, and by moving carefully when she did. She was up before dawn. She had coffee on by the time Ethan came down from the loft, and she had it the way he took it, black, no sugar, because she had noticed the first morning that there was no sugar bowl on the table, and the tin of condensed milk at the back of the shelf was unopened. She did not ask him what he needed. She watched what he reached for and what he set aside, and she adjusted. She did the same with the children. Thomas liked the crusts of the cornbread. Lily would not eat anything that had been mixed together. She picked out the individual pieces of her food and ate each one separately, which told Clara something about a child who needed to feel control over at least one small thing in a world that had changed too fast. Clara began separating Lily's portions before she served them. She never mentioned it. Lily never mentioned it either. But the girl started finishing her meals. The work itself was harder than Clara had let on in any conversation. She had not done outdoor labor before, not in the real sense, not hauling water from the well in a bucket twice her weight, not splitting wood, not dragging feed sacks across a barn floor. Her hands blistered in the first week, and she wrapped them at night with strips of cotton torn from an old apron, and she was at the well again before sunrise. She did not tell Ethan about the blisters. She did not tell him about the morning she dropped a full water bucket and had to sit down on the ground for a few minutes because her arms gave out and she could not immediately stand. She told herself, this is just a new muscle. It will come. It came. By the third week, she could carry 2 buckets without stopping. By the end of the month, she had reorganized the cellar, cleaned and reseasoned. All the cookware, repaired the kitchen garden on the east side, with seeds she found in a tin on the back porch shelf, and mapped every room of the house for what was missing and what needed mending. Thomas noticed the changes before his father did. "You moved things," he said one evening, standing in the kitchen doorway while she was washing the supper dishes. It was not an accusation, more an observation he hadn't decided what to do with. "I did," she said. "Does it bother you?" He thought about that for a minute. "Mama had things in different places." "I know. I looked at the marks on the shelves where things used to sit." She handed him a dried plate to stack. "I'm not trying to change your mother's kitchen. I'm trying to make it work again. Those can be the same thing, or they can be different, you get to decide." He took the plate. He set it on the stack without dropping it, which was better than he'd managed the first few times she'd handed him things. "She used to make biscuits on Sunday," he said. "Real ones, not cornbread." "I can make biscuits," Clara said. "I'll need your help with the oven temperature. I don't know this stove yet." He looked up. "You want my help?" "I need your help," she said. "There's a difference between wanting and needing, and this is the second one." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "Papa's the one who usually messes with the stove damper." "Then you'll have to show me what he does." That Sunday, Thomas Walker stood at the kitchen stove and explained the particular temperament of the Walker Ranch cook stove to Clara Whitfield, with the gravity of a 9-year-old who has been given an important responsibility. She made biscuits. They were not as good as his mother's, she knew that without being told, and she did not pretend otherwise. But Thomas ate 3 of them and did not say a word about the difference, which was its own kind of compliment. Lily watched from the doorway. The following Sunday, Lily came all the way into the kitchen. The Sunday after that, she sat at the table while the biscuits were baking and let Clara show her the beginning of a simple stitch on a scrap of muslin. Just a straight line. Nothing complicated. Just the needle and the thread going in and coming out in a rhythm that Clara had always found calming, and that Lily seemed to find calming too, because the girl's shoulders came down from around her ears for the first time since Clara had arrived. "Mama sued," Lily said. It was the first full sentence she had spoken directly to Clara. "I know," Clara said. "Your father told me. He said she made all your dresses." Lily looked down at the muslin. "She was going to teach me." "I know that too." Clara kept her voice even and honest. She did not rush toward comfort. She had learned that rushing toward a grieving child only made them run in the opposite direction. She just kept the needle moving slow and steady, and let Lily be the one to decide how close to come. "You don't have to learn from me," she said, "but if you want to, I'm here." Lily stitched 4 uneven, imperfect rows that afternoon. She held the muslin up and looked at it when she was done, and she did not say anything. But she folded it and put it in her dress pocket, and she carried it with her when she left the kitchen. Clara pressed her hands flat against the table for a moment after the girl was gone. She breathed in slowly. She had not saved anyone. She had not fixed anything. A child had made 4 crooked stitches on a piece of scrap cloth, and it was the most important thing that had happened in this house in a long time. That was all. That was enough. Ethan Walker saw none of this, or rather, he saw the results of it, the way a man who is always working sees the results of things without fully registering the work itself. He noticed that the children were eating. He noticed that Thomas had started talking again at supper. He noticed that Lily had come back to the kitchen table, which she had not done since before her mother died. He noticed that there was always coffee ready, and that the house had stopped feeling like a building that was waiting for something to collapse. He noticed all of this, the way a man notices the sky has changed, whether aware of it, grateful for it, but not entirely sure when the change began or what exactly caused it. He did not know what to say to Clara about any of it. What he said instead. One evening when she was still in the kitchen and he had come in late from mending fence was, "You're stronger than I thought." She was wringing out the dishcloth. She did not look up immediately. "Is that meant to be an apology?" she asked. "No," he said. "I'm not sure I owe you one. You told me in front of half the town that I wasn't what you asked for." "You weren't," he said. She hung the dishcloth on the rack by the stove and turned to face him. "What exactly did you ask for, Mr. Walker?" He took off his hat. He set it on the table and ran a hand through his hair. He did not answer right away, which told her the question had hit something real. "I asked for someone who could help me keep this ranch from failing," he said finally. "Someone strong enough to handle the work and practical enough to not need looking after. And instead you got me." "Instead I got you," he said. He was looking at her steadily now, and she returned it, and the silence between them was not comfortable, but it was honest, which was its own kind of thing. "My hands blistered the first week," she said. "I dropped a full water bucket and had to sit on the ground. I didn't know how to manage the stove damper, and I still sometimes let the fire bank too low at night." He said nothing. "But I'm still here," she said. "And your children are eating. And your kitchen is running. And that fence on the west pasture needs the second post from the left, replaced, not just propped. The lumber you used will rot in the first hard rain." A muscle moved in his jaw. "You noticed that?" "I notice things," she said. "That's what I'm good at. It may not be what you asked for, but it's what you have." He was quiet for a long time. She could hear the barn settling in the evening wind, and somewhere out in the darkness, one of the horses moved and was still. "You should know," he said at last, "that Margaret Caldwell came to see me today." Clara had heard the name already from Thomas, who had mentioned it without explanation, in the way children mention things they've overheard and are not entirely sure they were supposed to. She kept her face neutral. "I see. She's been a neighbor a long time. Her family owns the Double C, runs about twice the head of cattle I do." He paused. "She had some things to say about you." "I imagine she did. She said you were likely only here because you had no other options. That a woman in your position would tell a man what he wanted to hear until she had what she needed, and then she'd be gone." Clara let that sit for a moment. Then she said, "And what do you think?" "I think," Ethan Walker said slowly, "that you mended the kitchen garden, reorganized my cellar, got my daughter to come back to the table, and just told me my own fence post is going to rot. A woman running a con doesn't usually come with that kind of attention to detail." "No," Clara said. "She doesn't." He picked his hat up from the table. "I'll replace the post tomorrow," he said. "I can show you which one." "I know which one," he said. "I've been putting it off." He walked out. She listened to his boots on the porch and across the yard toward the barn, and she stood in the kitchen for a moment in the quiet. That was not forgiveness. It was not even trust. It was something smaller and more practical, a man who was beginning against his own instincts to pay attention. She would take it. In the weeks that followed, the town of Millhaven formed its own opinions about Clara Whitfield, and those opinions were not kind. She encountered them in small doses at the general store, on the rare occasion she accompanied Ethan to town for supplies, in the way women stopped their conversations when she came near, in the way the storekeeper's wife watched her hands while she counted coins, as though expecting her to be short. At the dry goods store on a Thursday morning, a woman named Helen Marsh, whose husband ran the bank in town, and who had known Margaret Caldwell since childhood, spoke to her companion loudly enough to ensure Clara heard every word. "Poor man," Helen Marsh said, examining a bolt of fabric with great interest. "He was decent enough to take her in and give her a roof over her head, and now she's got her hooks into those children. It's always the ones who look helpless that know exactly what they're doing." Clara set her list on the counter. She asked the clerk for 2 pounds of dried beans, a tin of baking powder, and a spool of white thread. She did not turn around. The woman's companion said something in a lower voice that Clara could not fully hear. "Oh, she'll be gone by winter," Helen Marsh said. "Women like that always are. They don't have the constitution for real life." Clara paid for her goods. She thanked the clerk. She picked up her parcel and walked out. She sat in the wagon for a moment before she untied the reins. She thought about the fact that she had been told all her life in one way or another, by employers and neighbors and the woman at the agency who had first hired her, by the expression on Ethan Walker's face when he looked at her across that dusty road, that she was not enough. Too quiet, too slight, too careful, too soft. The wrong kind of strength. She had never learned how to fight that particular argument with words. She had only ever learned to answer it with time. She untied the reins. She drove back to the ranch. She went back to work. It was 3 days after that when she found the ledger. She had been reorganizing the stack of papers on the kitchen table, moving systematically through the pile with Ethan's grudging permission, because the pile had become a problem, and she could not ignore it any longer, when she found near the bottom a water-stained ledger that did not match the household accounts she had already sorted. It was older, its spine cracked, and its corners soft with age, and it was filled with columns of numbers in 2 different handwritings, one she recognized as Ethan's and one she did not. She sat down at the table. She opened to the first page and began to read. The ledger was a record of the Walker Ranch's water rights and grazing boundaries going back 18 years back, to the original land grant. Back to before Ethan had built the current house, back to when this had been his father's land. The entries were meticulous. Every source of water on the property was documented, every creek, every spring, every seasonal pond, along with the date of the original claim and the neighboring properties that abutted them. What she found on the 43rd page was not an entry. It was a notation in the unfamiliar handwriting added in pencil along the margin, so faint it would have been easy to miss. It read, "Right-of-way easement disputed, see County Records, March 1877 DM." She stared at that notation for a long time. DM. She turned back through the ledger carefully. The second handwriting appeared in a dozen other places, small additions, corrections, clarifications. All of them initialed the same way. DM. She did not know yet who DM was, but she knew that an easement dispute on water rights in a drought valley could be worth a great deal to the right kind of person. And she knew that the drought that had hit the eastern pasture this summer, the one that had forced Ethan to shift his cattle to the western range and had strained the well beyond its usual capacity, was the kind of pressure that turned a disputed water right into something someone might want very badly. She set the ledger carefully aside. She went to the cellar and found the box where Ethan kept the older household papers. She began to read. She was still reading when Ethan came in 2 hours later and stopped in the kitchen doorway. He looked at the papers spread across the table. He looked at Clara. He looked at the ledger open in front of her. "What are you doing?" he said. There was an edge in his voice, not quite anger, more the sound of a man who has found someone in a room he did not know anyone else had access to. "Sit down," she said. "Clara." "Please," she said. "Sit down." He sat. She showed him the notation in the margin. She showed him the county records she had found in the box, the 1877 filing, the counterfiling, the agreement that had been drawn up and signed, and she suspected never properly registered. "This easement," she said. "The one along Cutter Creek. Do you know about it?" He looked at the paper for a long time. "My father dealt with that. I was 12. Something about the creek changing course after the spring floods." "It changed course, and it moved the property boundary," she said. "Or rather, it made the property boundary unclear, and whoever DM is, whoever made these notes, they knew about it." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Daniel Marsh," he said. "He worked for my father for 2 years. Left when I was 17. His wife is Helen Marsh. She married into the bank." Clara let that sit. She watched understanding move across Ethan Walker's face, the way weather moves across a flat plain, slow at first and then all at once. "The bank," he said. "The loans I took out after Sarah died after the bad winter." "All held by the Millhaven Savings and Loan," Clara said quietly. "Owned by Roy Marsh," he said. "Helen's father-in-law." "Yes." The silence in the kitchen was the kind that comes before something breaks. "Someone has been pushing that boundary dispute," Clara said carefully. "Not publicly, not yet. But these records have been pulled and refiled at least twice in the past 4 years. I can see the handling marks on the paper." She looked at him steadily. "If someone forced a default on your loans, and then contested the water rights, the ranch, the land, the water access, all of it would be worth far more than what you owe." Ethan stood up. He walked to the window. He stood with his back to her for a long moment, and she let him have that. Let him have the full weight of what she had just put in front of him, because it deserved to be felt and not rushed past. Then he turned around. "You found this," he said, "in a pile of papers on my kitchen table." "I notice things," she said. He looked at her for a long moment, and it was different from the look on the road the day she arrived, different from every look he had given her since. It was the look of a man who has been wrong about something and knows it, and is deciding right now what kind of man he is going to be about being wrong. "Clara," he said. "Don't," she said. "Not yet. There's more to look through, and we're going to need to understand all of it before we decide what to do." He nodded once. He pulled out the chair across from her and sat back down. "Then let's look," he said. They sat at that kitchen table until midnight, long after Thomas and Lily had gone to bed, and the fire had burned to embers, and the oil lamp needed trimming twice. They went through every document in the box. They went through the ledger page by page. Clara organized what she found into 3 piles: things that were clear, things that were uncertain, and things that needed a lawyer's eye. And she explained each one quietly and carefully. And Ethan listened the way a man listens when he has finally entirely stopped deciding in advance what he is going to hear. Outside, the Montana stars burned cold and enormous over the Walker Ranch. And in the kitchen, in the light of a trimmed lamp, a man who had been trying to survive alone began slowly and without quite knowing it to stop. The lamp had burned low by the time they finished. Clara stacked the last of the papers into their 3 piles, clear, uncertain, and needs a lawyer, and pressed her palms flat against the table, the way she always did when she needed to think without her hands getting in the way. Ethan sat across from her with his elbows on the table and his face in his hands, and he had been sitting that way for the last few minutes without speaking, which she had learned meant he was not done thinking, only done talking for the moment. She waited. "Roy Marsh," he said finally without lifting his head. "I shook that man's hand. I sat at his desk and told him about Sarah dying in the bad winter and what I needed to keep the ranch going. And he poured me a glass of whiskey and told me his bank was a community institution and that neighbors look after neighbors." He lifted his head. His eyes were steady but dark. "He said that." "I know," Clara said. "He said that to my face." "I know, Ethan." He pushed back from the table. He walked to the window and stood with his back to her, and she could see the set of his shoulders, the particular tension of a man who is holding something very heavy and is trying to decide whether to put it down gently or throw it. "How long?" he said. "How long has this been going on?" She looked at the papers. The first refiling was 4 years ago, right after Sarah, right after the funeral. She kept her voice careful. "Whoever started this picked their moment." He turned around. "They waited until I was grieving." "Yes. They watched this ranch struggling, and they decided that was the right time to start pulling the thread." That's what the documents suggest. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "You found this in an afternoon." "I've been looking at the papers for 3 weeks," she said. "I didn't know what I was looking for until today. The ledger was what tied it together." "I had that ledger for 6 years," he said. "I moved it 3 times. I never opened it." "You were surviving," she said. "Surviving and noticing things that need finding are different kinds of work." He looked at her with an expression she hadn't seen on him before. Not gratitude, exactly, not admiration, but something more complicated and more honest than either of those. Something that looked like a man realizing he has been living in a house with a wall missing and has only just turned around to see where the cold was coming from. "What do we do?" he said. "We need the county records," she said. "The originals, not copies. We need to know whether that easement filing was registered properly, because if it wasn't, then whatever Marsh is building his claim on is standing on air." She paused. "We also need to know who DM Daniel Marsh told about this before he died, because someone is still pulling those threads, and it isn't a dead man." Ethan was very still. "Roy Marsh," he said again, but this time it was not a grievance. It was a conclusion. "Or someone working for him," Clara said. "Either way, we need to be careful. If they know we're looking, they'll move faster." "You think they're watching the ranch?" "I think someone has been watching this ranch for a long time," she said. "I think the drought that hit your east pasture this summer did not happen by accident." He stared at her. "What are you saying?" She picked up the 3rd stack of papers, the ones marked "Needs a Lawyer," and held them toward him. Near the top was a hand-drawn survey map with a small notation in the bottom corner, circled twice in pencil, upstream diversion. Temporary. She had found it tucked inside a water rights notice from 3 years ago. She had almost missed it. Ethan took the map. He looked at it for a long time. "The creek runs lower every summer," he said slowly. "I thought it was the dry years. I thought, there's a diversion," Clara said. "I don't know where yet, but someone somewhere upstream has been redirecting water away from your land. Slowly enough that it looks like weather, long enough that you stopped questioning it." He set the map down on the table. He sat back down across from her, and he looked at her the way a man looks at something he cannot quite account for. Not with suspicion, not with warmth, but with the particular honesty of a person who has run out of room for pretending. "Who are you?" he said. She almost smiled. "I'm the woman you told wasn't what you asked for," she said. "I was wrong about that." "Yes," she said. "You were." He didn't look away. "I'm sorry." "I know," she said. "Now let's figure out what we're going to do about the Marsh family." They talked until the last of the oil burned out, and then Ethan lit the second lamp, and they kept going. And by the time Clara finally said they needed to sleep before they made any decisions, they couldn't take back. The sky outside the window had gone from black to the particular dark blue that comes before the color returns. She slept 3 hours. She was at the well before sunrise. The thing about a secret Clara had learned from years of working in other people's houses is that it rarely lives alone. A secret needs tending, needs people who know about it and choose to keep it, needs systems that allow it to survive, needs the ongoing cooperation of people who benefit from it staying hidden. And a secret that has been running for 4 years has had time to grow roots. She thought about this while she worked through the morning chores, and she thought about the way Margaret Caldwell had appeared at the ranch 3 days after Clara arrived, too quickly, too certainly, with too well-prepared a set of opinions about a woman she had never met. She thought about the way Helen Marsh had spoken at the dry goods store. She thought about the loan documents in the third pile, and the name of the man who had countersigned them at the bank alongside Roy Marsh. James Aldrich, Millhaven's County Land Commissioner. She was still thinking about James Aldrich when Ethan came out of the barn and found her at the woodpile splitting kindling with more precision than force, because she had learned in the past weeks that precision worked better for her than force, and produced the same result if she was patient about it. "You didn't sleep," he said. "I slept enough," she said. "Clara." She set the hatchet down and looked at him. "I need to go into town," she said. "The county land office opens at 8. I want to look at the easement filings myself before we decide anything." He crossed his arms. "I'll take you." "I think it would be better if I went alone." His jaw tightened. "Why?" "Because if you walk into that land office, every person in Millhaven will know about it by noon," she said. "You're Ethan Walker. This is your land. Your name on those documents means something to people here. It signals trouble. It signals legal action. And it gives whoever is watching time to move things around before we can see them." She held his gaze. "But if I walk in, I'm just the mail-order woman who doesn't know what she's doing. Nobody's going to look twice at what I ask to see." He looked at her for a long moment. She could see him working through the logic of it, and she could see him not liking it. Not because it was wrong, but because it required him to let her take a risk while he stayed behind. "I don't like it," he said. "I know," she said. "Do you have a better idea?" He did not. "Then I'll take the wagon into town at 7:30, she said. "I'll be back before noon." She was back by 10:45. She came in through the kitchen door and set her parcel on the table and looked at Ethan, who had been pacing the length of the kitchen for the better part of an hour, based on the way he stopped moving when she walked in the sudden stillness of a man who has been waiting and is trying not to show how hard the waiting was. "Sit down," she said. "Tell me." "Sit down first," she said. "Because this is going to take a minute, and you're going to want to be sitting for the part in the middle." He sat. She unwrapped the parcel pages she had carefully copied by hand at the county clerk's desk, 3 full sheets, because the clerk had been a young man of about 20 who had been happy to let her take her time once she'd explained she was trying to understand a property document for her husband, and wasn't sure she was reading it correctly. Men who believed a woman couldn't read a legal document were useful in very specific ways. The easement filing from 1877 was registered, she said. But the 1883 counterfiling, the one that should have resolved the boundary dispute in your father's favor, was recorded incorrectly. The parcel number is wrong by 1 digit. Which means legally, as far as the county record is concerned, the boundary dispute was never closed. Ethan looked at the page she slid toward him. 1 digit. 1 digit, she said. Which could be a clerical error. Or it could be a clerical error that someone made on purpose, and then left alone, because a pending dispute is more useful to certain people than a resolved one. James Aldrich, he said. He said it flatly without surprise, which meant he had been working toward the same conclusion on his own. He was county land commissioner in 1883, Clara said. His signature is on both filings. Ethan set the paper down. He pressed 2 fingers to his mouth and looked at the wall for a moment. Then he said, "They've been sitting on this for 3 years, waiting for the right moment to use it." "And the right moment," Clara said, "is a defaulted loan." "Which they've been engineering," he said. "The water diversion, the dry pasture, losing 2/3 of my summer grazing and having to buy extra feed, that's what pushed me close to the line on the loan payments. And if you default," she said, "the bank forecloses, the land goes to auction, and Roy Marsh or someone connected to him buys it for less than it's worth, including the water rights that the pending easement dispute conveniently makes impossible for anyone else to claim cleanly." The silence in the kitchen was the kind that comes when 2 people have reached the same ugly destination at the same time and are standing in front of it together. "They'll let me lose everything," Ethan said. Not a question, a statement. Said the way a man says something he needs to hear out loud before he can fully believe it. "They've been planning it," Clara said. "Yes." He stood up. He walked to the window again, and she had come to understand that this was what he did when he was angry, when the feeling was too big to stay seated with. He stood at the window and looked out at his land at the ranch his father had built, and that he had kept alive through a bad winter and a dead wife and 2 children who needed him to keep going, and he stood there for a long time. Then he turned around, and his eyes were clear. "What do we do?" he said. And it was the same question he had asked the night before, but it was different now, not lost, not overwhelmed. It was the question of a man who has made a decision and wants the next step. "We find the water diversion," Clara said. "That's physical evidence. That's not a filing error that someone can explain away as a clerical mistake. That's deliberate interference with your water supply. And if we can document it and show it to the right people, it changes what this looks like from a property dispute to something else entirely." "And the loan. I need to look at the payment records," she said. "All of them. Every payment you've made since you took out the loan. I want to know if there's anything in the accounting that doesn't sit right." He went to the shelf above the fireplace in the main room and came back with a tin box. He set it on the table in front of her. "Everything's in there," he said. "I kept every receipt." She looked at him. "You kept every receipt." "My father told me to always keep every receipt," he said. "He said a man who can't show what he paid and when he paid it has no argument worth listening to." She opened the box. She started with the most recent payments and worked backward, and within 20 minutes she had found the first one. A payment made in March documented in Ethan's hand with the receipt stamped by the bank teller that had been logged in the bank's accounting record as arriving 1 week late. She had the bank's copy because she'd asked to see the master ledger when she was at the land office, and the young clerk had obligingly walked her to the adjoining records room without understanding quite what she was looking for. "This payment," she said. "March 14th, you have the receipt." "I always paid on time," he said immediately. "I know, but according to the bank's record, it arrived on March 21st. He stared at her. "That's not possible." "No," she said, "it isn't, but it's what the record shows." He took the receipt from her hand and looked at it. The date stamp from the bank teller was March 14th, clear and unambiguous. He looked at the copy she'd made of the master ledger entry, March 21st. "They changed the record," he said. "Someone did," she said, "to make it look like I'm a late payer. To build a case that you're unreliable," she said. so that when they move to foreclose, there's a paper trail that says the bank gave you every opportunity and you couldn't meet your obligations. Ethan set the receipt down on the table very carefully, the way a man sets down something he is afraid of breaking before he is done with it. He looked at Clara. "How did you know to look for this?" "I've worked in a lot of houses," she said. "I've seen what happens when someone in a position of power decides that another person's loss is useful to them. The methods change. The pattern doesn't." He was quiet for a moment. "Your other households," he said. Was it always like this? People taking from others the way they—" "Not always," she said. "But enough times that I learned to look for it." She paused. "I also learned that the people who do it depend on the person being taken from not looking, not knowing, being too busy surviving to see the shape of what's happening." "I was too busy surviving," he said. "Yes," she said. "And that wasn't a weakness. It was grief and work and 2 children who needed you to keep the ranch from falling apart. You weren't supposed to be watching the bank records for tampering. You were supposed to be able to trust the people you had an agreement with." He looked at her steadily. "You're defending me." "I'm telling you the truth," she said. "There's a difference." He almost said something. She could see it, something that was not quite ready yet, something that needed more time before it was safe to say out loud. She did not push. She turned back to the papers. "We have the receipts," she said. "We have the ledger copies. We have the easement filings. We need the water diversion. And we need someone who can look at all of this and tell us what it means in terms of the law. Because I can read documents, and I can understand what they say. But I am not a lawyer, and I don't know how to take this to the right people, in the right order." "There's a man in Billings," Ethan said. "Henry Pryor. He handled my father's land dealings years ago. I haven't spoken to him since the original mortgage on the ranch, but he's a good man, honest." "Can you get to Billings?" 2 days' ride, he said. 3 if the weather turns. "Then you need to go," she said. "Soon before anything else moves." "I can't leave the ranch," he said immediately. "The children will be here," she said. "With me." He looked at her. "I will be here," she said again. "The children will be looked after. The morning chores will be done. Nothing will fall apart in 3 days." She held his gaze. "Go see Henry Pryor. Take the receipts. Take the ledger copies. Take the easement filings. Let him tell you what you're holding and how to use it." I was quiet for a long time. Outside, she could hear Thomas doing something at the water trough, a rhythmic splashing that told her the boy was working. Not just playing, which had become increasingly common in the past weeks, as he'd attached himself to the idea that there were useful things he could do on this ranch. "You've been here 4 weeks, Ethan said. "Yes." "You came here with 1 suitcase and no experience with ranch work." "Yes. And in 4 weeks you've done—" He stopped. He looked at the table covered in papers and copies and organized piles and receipt stubs and hand-drawn maps. "Clara, it's just paying attention," she said. "That's all it is." "It's not," he said. "It is not just paying attention. I've had this ranch for 12 years, and I didn't see any of this." His voice was careful, controlled, but she could hear the weight behind it. "How do you do this? How do you walk into a place where no one wants you and turn it inside out and find the thing no one else found and just keep going? How do you keep going when no one gives you any reason to?" She looked at him for a long moment. "Because the work is there," she said finally. "Because Thomas and Lily needed someone to feed them and listen to them and show them that not everyone leaves. Because your fence post was rotting and your kitchen garden was dying and your ledger was sitting in a pile of paper with the answer to your problem right there in the margin." She paused. "I keep going because stopping has never once solved anything." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he said very quietly, "I owe you more than I know how to say." "You don't owe me anything," she said. "This is where I live now. I take care of things where I live, that's all." She turned back to the papers. He did not move for another moment. Then he pulled out the chair and sat back down beside her, and he picked up the next set of receipts, and he started to go through them with her, his big work-roughened hands and her careful, precise ones side by side on the table in the lamp-lit kitchen, working through the evidence of what had been done to his family, one document at a time. He left for Billings 2 days later before dawn. He had argued with her 3 more times about leaving the ranch, and 3 times she had waited until he was finished, and then said the same thing. Go see Henry Pryor. He had come very close on the second argument to saying something about not wanting to leave her alone here, not the ranch specifically her, and had stopped himself and redirected to the cattle schedule instead, and she had pretended not to notice what he'd almost said. The morning he left, Thomas came and stood in the kitchen doorway at 5 in the morning in his nightshirt, watching his father tie the saddlebags on the horse in the yard. Where's he going? Thomas said. Business, Clara said. He'll be back in 3 days. He didn't go anywhere after Mama died, Thomas said. He didn't leave the ranch for 6 months. I know, Clara said. Come in and sit down. I'll make hotcakes. He came in. He sat down. He was quiet for a moment, and then he said, Did you make him go? I told him he needed to, she said. He decided to. Is the ranch in trouble? Thomas said. He said it directly the way his father asked direct questions, without cushioning it or approaching it sideways, just straight out, because he was 9 years old and had already learned that the straightforward question was the only one that got a real answer. Clara looked at him. She made a decision. Yes, she said. There are people who want to take the ranch, and your father is going to see a lawyer in Billings who can help us figure out how to stop them. Thomas was very still. Can they do that? Can they just take it? They're trying, she said. We're trying harder. He looked at her. We, he said. We, she said. He nodded once, a small firm nod, his father's nod, exactly the decision made, and no need to revisit it. Then I'll do the morning chores, he said. You won't have to do them alone. She set a hand briefly on his shoulder as she went past him to the stove. She did not make a thing of it. He did not make a thing of it. But he sat up a little straighter at the table, and when Lily came down 20 minutes later and asked where Papa was, it was Thomas who answered. Business. He'll be back in 3 days. Sit down. Clara made hotcakes. Lily sat down. She looked at Clara with those wide, careful eyes. Will he really come back? She said. Yes, Clara said. He will come back. Mama didn't come back, Lily said. The kitchen was very quiet. Clara brought the hotcakes to the table and sat down across from the girl. She folded her hands on the table and looked at Lily straight on. Your mama didn't have a choice, she said. Your papa does. And he is choosing to come back because you are here, and there is nothing in this world stronger than a father coming home to his children. Lily looked at her. Her chin was steady, which took effort. Clara could see the effort, but she held it. You promise, Lily said. I don't make promises I can't keep, Clara said. But I believe it, with everything I have, and I am going to be right here with you until he walks back through that door. Lily picked up her fork. She ate her hotcakes. The 3 days without Ethan were the longest and the fullest 3 days Clara had spent at the Walker Ranch. She and Thomas managed the morning chores together, and Thomas, who had been watching his father do these tasks for years, turned out to know considerably more about running the practical operations of the ranch than either of them had expected. He knew which horses needed what, how much feed went in, which trough, which sections of fence his father checked daily, and which could go a week without attention. He explained all of this to Clara with the slightly over-careful tone of someone who has recently been given a real responsibility and is not yet entirely sure they deserve it. She let him lead. She asked questions she already knew the answers to because a 9-year-old boy who has been told his family is in trouble needs to feel useful more than he needs to be corrected. Lily stayed closer to the house, helping Clara in the kitchen and with the garden, and on the second afternoon retrieving the muslin from her dress pocket and asking without preamble if they could sew. We can sew, Clara said. They sat at the kitchen table. Lily had graduated in the past weeks from straight lines to a simple daisy stitch that Clara had taught her carefully needle in and needle out the thread, making small loops that opened into petals when pulled through at the right angle. Lily was better at it than she admitted. She held the work close to her face when she examined it, frowning with concentration, and her stitches had a precision that came naturally, not from practice. I want to make something for Papa, Lily said, when he comes home. What did you have in mind? Clara said. Lily thought about this for a moment. Mama made him a handkerchief once, a real one, with his initial on it. E, Clara said. For Ethan. She showed me the letter once, Lily said. The E, but I don't remember how she made it. I can show you, Clara said. It's just the same stitch, just bent into the shape of the letter. Lily held out the muslin. Show me now. They worked on the E for the rest of the afternoon, Lily pulling it out 3 times and starting again because it wasn't right, and she knew it wasn't right, and she was not willing to give her father something that wasn't right. Clara did not tell her to stop. She did not tell her the imperfect versions were good enough. She just showed her again and again and again until the 4th attempt produced an E that Lily held up to the window and looked at and said quietly, "That's it. That's what Mama's looked like." Clara looked at the handkerchief in the girl's hands. She looked at the careful, steady stitch and the loop of the letter and the way Lily was holding it like it was something fragile and important and entirely her own. "Your mother taught you more than you know," Clara said. Lily folded the handkerchief. She put it in her pocket. She picked up the muslin again and started the next stitch. Ethan rode back in on the evening of the 3rd day, exactly when he said he would, and Thomas spotted him from the yard before anyone else and let out a shout that brought both Clara and Lily to the door at the same time. He looked different. Not changed, but something in his posture had shifted the way a man's posture shifts when he has been carrying something alone for a long time and has finally found someone to help him carry it. He swung down from the horse, and Thomas was already there, and Ethan caught the boy with one arm and held him without making a production of it, just a hand on the back of Thomas's head, brief and firm, the way men in this country showed the things they couldn't say. Lily walked down the porch steps and stopped in front of him. He looked at her. "Hey, Lil." She pulled the handkerchief from her pocket and held it out to him. He took it. He looked at it. Really looked at it, turning it in his hands, and she watched his face move through something she could not quite name. "Did you make this?" he said. "Clara helped me with the letter," Lily said. "The rest I did myself." He folded the handkerchief carefully and put it in his shirt pocket right over his chest. "I'm going to keep it right here," he said. Lily nodded. She walked back up the porch steps and went inside because she was 7 years old and had just done something enormous and needed to go back to being normal for a while. Ethan looked up at Clara, who was still standing in the doorway. "Henry Pryor," he said. "He says we have a case." Clara felt something release in her chest, not surprise but relief, which is different. "Come inside," she said. "Tell me everything." He came inside. He sat at the kitchen table, their table now, the one covered in evidence and papers, and the organized piles that Clara had been adding to for 3 days, and he told her everything Henry Pryor had said. The lawyer had confirmed the filing error. He had looked at the altered payment records and called them what they were, fraud clearly documented with a paper trail that pointed directly at the Millhaven Savings and Loans accounting process. He had talked about water rights law and the legal definition of deliberate diversion and what it meant when a county land commissioner's signature appeared on a document that had been incorrectly filed. "He's coming to Millhaven," Ethan said. 2 weeks. He's going to look at the water diversion himself. He needs to see it in person before we file anything formally. "We need to find it first," Clara said. "I know where to look," he said. "There's a section of Cutter Creek about 3 miles north where the banks were shored up about 4 years ago. Someone told me it was flood damage repair. I never questioned it." His jaw was tight. "I should have questioned it." "You couldn't have known," she said. "You would have known," he said. She looked at him. "I'm not you," she said. "And you're not me. That's not a failure. That's why we're both at this table." He looked at her for a long moment. Outside, Thomas was settling the horse in the barn, and the sounds of it, the easy, familiar rhythm of a boy doing a job he knows how to do, came through the quiet of the evening and filled the kitchen with something that was not quite silence and not quite sound, but something in between. Something like normalcy. Something like a household that is running the way a household should run. "Margaret Caldwell came by while you were gone," Clara said. His expression sharpened. "When?" "Yesterday afternoon. She wanted to speak with you. When I told her you were away on business, she said, And these are her words, not mine, that she hoped you hadn't trusted the ranch's affairs to someone who had no business being involved in them. What did you say? I told her you'd be back in 2 days and she was welcome to come speak with you then, Clara said. She said some other things. I don't think they're worth repeating. Tell me anyway. She looked at him steadily. She told me that a woman in my position should understand the limits of her situation. That a man like you, her words, deserves a real partner, not a hired hand who's gotten above herself. She paused. She said that whatever I thought was happening between us, I should not mistake Charity for something else. The muscle in his jaw was working steadily. She had no right. She had every right, Clara said. She's known you for years. She has opinions. She's allowed to have opinions. Not like that. Maybe not, Clara said. But it doesn't matter. What she thinks about me doesn't change what's on this table. And what's on this table is more important than what Margaret Caldwell thinks about my position in this household. He looked at her for a moment. Then he said, "And what is your position in this household?" She was quiet for a beat. "I am the woman who is helping you save your ranch," she said. "That's what I came here to do." "Clara." "That is what I came here to do," she said again steadily, not unkindly. "Whatever else is or isn't, that's what matters right now. The ranch, your children. Getting Henry Pryor out here before the Marsh family decides it's time to move." I was looking at her with that expression again, the one she hadn't learned a name for yet, the one that made her feel seen in a way she was not entirely sure she was ready for. He did not push. He was beginning to understand she thought that she was not a woman who could be rushed toward things, that she needed to arrive at them herself on her own time, and that pushing only made her hold her ground. "All right," he said. "The ranch first." "The ranch first," she agreed. He reached across the table and picked up the top paper from the clear pile, and he looked at it, and he said, "Walk me through what you found while I was gone." She walked him through it. They worked until the lamp needed oil, and then Ethan went to the cellar and brought up more oil, and they kept working, and by the time the house had gone fully dark and quiet around them, Thomas asleep in the loft, Lily in her small room off the hallway they had built together at that kitchen table, something that looked very much like a plan. It was not a simple plan. It required timing and coordination, and the cooperation of at least 2 neighboring ranchers who Ethan believed he could trust, and who would need to be brought in carefully before anyone connected to the Marsh family got wind of what was being assembled. It required Clara to go back to the county land office one more time with a specific set of questions, and to do it in a way that raised no flags. But it was a plan. It was solid. And it was theirs. Outside, the Montana wind moved across the valley and pressed against the walls of the Walker Ranch house, and the house held against it the way it had always held. Not perfectly, not without some give in the corners and some settling in the older walls, but firmly enough, solidly enough. The way anything holds when the right people are inside it paying attention. Henry Pryor arrived on a Tuesday, which was the same day Margaret Caldwell chose to ride out to the Walker Ranch unannounced for the second time in 2 weeks. Clara saw both of them coming from the kitchen window. Pryor from the North Road, a lean older man on a gray horse with a leather saddlebag, thick enough to suggest he had brought everything he needed and planned to stay until the work was done, and Caldwell from the east on her fine bay mare, riding with the particular posture of a woman who considers herself the most important person in any room she enters before she has even entered it. Clara dried her hands on the kitchen cloth. She walked to the front door and opened it before either of them reached the porch. "Mr. Pryor," she said, "we've been expecting you. Ethan's at the creek. Thomas will take you out." She looked past him. "Miss Caldwell, Ethan isn't available this morning. You're welcome to wait." Margaret Caldwell pulled her mare up short and looked at Clara with an expression that had moved some distance past politeness into something more openly appraising. She was a handsome woman, somewhere north of 40, with dark hair and the kind of posture that comes from a lifetime of being told you carry yourself well. She looked at Clara the way a woman looks at something she has decided is in her way. "I'll wait," she said. It was not agreement. It was a declaration. Pryor swung down from his horse and shook Clara's hand with the directness of a man who has been told things about her and has decided to make up his own mind. Mrs. Walker, he said. Miss Whitfield, she said. Not yet. He looked at her for a beat. Then he nodded once with the slight adjustment of a man recalibrating. Miss Whitfield, he said. Ethan has told me a great deal about what you found. I'd like to see those documents before I see the creek, if that's all right. They're on the kitchen table, she said. I've kept them in order. She brought him inside and left Caldwell on the porch, which was not an oversight. Pryor sat at the kitchen table and went through the 3 piles clear, uncertain, and needs a lawyer, and said nothing for 20 minutes. Clara made coffee. She did not hover. She had learned in the past weeks that lawyers like ranchers did their best thinking when no one was standing over them waiting for them to be done. When he finally looked up, his expression had changed. Not dramatically, he was a man who had practiced keeping his face from saying too much, but the shift was there. This payment discrepancy, he said, setting his finger on the March receipt. You found this in the bank's master ledger. I made a copy, she said. The original is at the county records office. And you accessed it how? I asked, she said. I told the clerk I was trying to understand a document and wasn't sure I was reading it correctly. He was helpful. Pryor looked at her for a moment. You walked into the Millhaven records office and asked Roy Marsh's county clerk to show you Roy Marsh's fraudulent accounting. I didn't know whose clerk he was at the time, she said. I assumed he was the county's clerk. He is, Pryor said. But Roy Marsh is on the county commissioner's board. Has been for 6 years. He set the paper down carefully. Miss Whitfield, if that young man mentioned to anyone that you were looking at those records. He won't have, she said. He thought I was confused about a property description. I was kind about it. He's not the kind of young man who gossips about confused women. Pryor looked at her steadily. You read people very quickly. Yes, she said. I do. I was quiet for a moment. Then he said, This is better than I expected. Considerably better. He tapped the easement filings. The filing error alone is grounds for a legal challenge to any claim based on the dispute, combined with documented payment tampering. We're not looking at a civil property matter, we're looking at something that a territorial judge would take very seriously. Fraud, she said. Fraud, he agreed. Potentially conspiracy depending on how many people knew. And if we can document the water diversion as deliberate interference, which I expect we can given what Ethan described, then we are looking at a case that would end several careers in this county. From the porch, they heard the sound of Margaret Caldwell's boot heel hitting the floorboard, a single impatient strike, as deliberate as a gavel. Pryor glanced toward the door. Is she going to be a problem? She's been a problem since the day I arrived, Clara said. But she doesn't know what's on this table, and I'd like to keep it that way a little longer. He nodded. I'll go see the creek. Keep her occupied. I'll manage, Clara said. She walked back out to the porch. Caldwell was standing at the railing looking out at the yard with her arms crossed, and she turned when Clara came out with the particular speed of a woman who has been rehearsing something. You've turned this place around, Caldwell said. Not a compliment. An accusation dressed in neutral language. The ranch was in need of attention, Clara said. I paid attention. Caldwell looked at her. And that man who just went inside a lawyer from the look of his saddlebag. Ethan's consulting lawyers now. Ethan has business to attend to, Clara said, as most ranchers do. What kind of business requires a lawyer riding out from Billings? Caldwell said. Her voice was smooth, practiced. The voice of a woman who has learned to ask the questions other people don't realize they're answering. Ethan's never needed outside counsel before. He handles his own affairs. People change their approach, Clara said. People are influenced to change their approach, Caldwell said. By people who have inserted themselves into situations that aren't their own. Clara looked at her. She held the look long enough that it became something deliberate. Miss Caldwell, she said, I have work to do inside. If you'd like to wait for Ethan, you're welcome to sit in the yard. If you'd like to come back another time when he isn't occupied, I can tell him you called. Caldwell's chin came up. You are very sure of yourself for a woman who arrived here 6 weeks ago with one suitcase and no credentials. Yes, Clara said. I am. She went back inside. She heard Caldwell's mare leave the yard 4 minutes later. She did not watch her go. Ethan came back from the creek 2 hours later with Pryor and with Thomas, who had insisted on coming along, and whom Pryor had apparently decided was useful company, because the two of them were talking with the easy rapport of a man and a boy who have spent a morning doing practical work together and respect each other for it. Thomas was describing the water levels in specific sections of the creek with the precision of a child who has been observing his environment his whole life and has simply never been asked to articulate it before. He knew exactly where the banks changed, Pryor told Clara when they came into the kitchen. The boy can read this land better than most grown men. Thomas stood up slightly taller. He tried to look like he hadn't heard the compliment. Did you find it? Clara asked. Pryor set his saddlebag on the table and unstrapped it. He pulled out a leather notebook, opened it, and turned it toward her. He had made a detailed sketch of the creek section, and at the northern curve, marked in precise notation, was a timber and stone structure that had been built into the bank, not flood repair, as anyone passing by might have assumed, but a deliberate barrier designed to redirect flow. It was old enough that vegetation had grown partially over it. Whoever built it had built it to last. That's 4 years old at minimum, Pryor said. Possibly 5. Built right after the drought of '79 when the creek levels were already down and no one was paying close attention to what was normal. He tapped the notation. This is the diversion. This is what's been pulling your water east onto Caldwell land for 4 years. The kitchen went very quiet. Ethan had gone absolutely still at the word Caldwell. Say that again, he said. The diversion redirects water eastward, Pryor said. Onto the property immediately adjacent to yours on the eastern boundary. He looked up. Who owns the eastern boundary? Ethan. Ethan's jaw was locked. Margaret Caldwell, he said. The double C runs along my entire eastern fence line. Clara had already put it together. She could see from Pryor's expression that he had put it together at the creek. She looked at Ethan and waited for it to reach him fully, watched it move across his face, the specific slow devastation of understanding that someone you have known for years, someone you considered a neighbor in the most fundamental frontier sense of that word, has been robbing your land, one redirected creek length at a time. She's in it with Marsh, Ethan said. It was barely a question. The double C runs cattle on water that has been supplemented by your creek diversion for at least 4 years, Pryor said. Her herd is considerably larger than her water rights should support. If you've been losing water, and she's been gaining it, and if her relationship with Roy Marsh goes deeper than neighborly acquaintance, her brother, Ethan said. His voice was very flat. Robert Caldwell. He works at the Millhaven Savings and Loan. Pryor opened his notebook to a fresh page. As what? Chief accountant, Ethan said. Pryor wrote this down without changing his expression. Clara watched him write it and thought, there it is. There is the center of it. Roy Marsh at the bank. James Aldrich at the land office. Robert Caldwell in the accounting department. And Margaret Caldwell on the land next door, patient, as drought waiting for the ranch beside hers to fail, so it could be absorbed into hers at a price that no honest auction would have produced. She came here this morning, Clara said, when you were at the creek. She wanted to know who Pryor was and why you'd brought a lawyer from Billings. Ethan looked at her. What did you tell her? Nothing, Clara said. But she'll be asking questions now. She'll be careful. She's been careful for 4 years, Ethan said. And now she's going to be scared, Pryor said. He closed the notebook. Scared people make mistakes. We need to move before she does. He looked at Ethan. Are there other ranchers in this valley who have been affected? Anyone else whose water levels have dropped, whose payments have had unexplained discrepancies, whose land would be convenient for someone with enough resources to wait them out? Ethan thought for a moment. The Reeves family, he said. Carl Reeves, his east pasture has been drying for 3 years. He blamed it on the weather cycle. And the Bauer place, old man Bauer, took out a loan 2 years ago after a bad season. I know he's been struggling to keep up. Talk to them, Pryor said. Not about the details, just enough to know whether their situations mirror yours. If Marsh and Caldwell have been running this on multiple properties, the pattern of evidence becomes much harder to dismiss. I'll go tomorrow, Ethan said. Go today? Clara said. Both men looked at her. Margaret Caldwell rode away from this yard 2 hours ago, knowing that a Billings lawyer is on this property, she said. Today she's thinking. Tomorrow she might be acting. Go today. Ethan held her gaze for a moment. Then he stood up and reached for his hat. I'll be back before dark, he said. He was out the door before Pryor had finished packing his notebook. Pryor looked at Clara. You run a tight operation, he said. I notice things, she said. Would you like more coffee? What Ethan brought back that evening was more than Clara had anticipated and less than she feared. Carl Reeves had listened to Ethan with the concentrated silence of a man who has been trying not to think about something and has been given permission to think about it. His water levels were down. He had 2 payment receipts that did not match the bank's records. He had kept them somewhat randomly in an old tobacco tin at the back of a shelf because they hadn't seemed right and he hadn't known what to do about them. He was willing to talk to Pryor. Old Man Bauer was less certain. He was a cautious man, German by birth, who had come to Montana for the land and had discovered that the land required things of him he had not anticipated. He had a wife, 3 grown children, and no appetite for legal confrontation with powerful men. He said he would think about it. We may not need Bauer, Pryor said when Ethan finished. Reeves is enough to establish a pattern if his receipts match your discrepancy dates. They matched, Ethan said. I asked him, March and July, same months as mine. Pryor sat back. Same months as yours, he said, and his voice had taken on a different quality, the particular satisfaction of a man whose theory has just been confirmed by evidence he did not arrange. Then they were working a system, a cycle. Altering records in specific months probably timed to the quarterly accounting reviews, so any individual discrepancy would be buried in the regular ledger activity. Sophisticated, Clara said. Robert Caldwell is a trained accountant, Pryor said. He knows how ledgers are audited. He knows where to hide a number. He looked at Ethan. This is bigger than a property dispute. This is a coordinated scheme to defraud multiple landowners in this valley, and it has been running for years under the protection of the county land office and the local bank. He paused. When I file this, it's not going to stay local. A case like this goes to the territorial court. And until then, Ethan said. Until then, Pryor said, you pay every loan payment on time, you document every payment with 2 witnesses, and you do not give Roy Marsh any legitimate reason to accelerate the loan terms. He looked at them both. And you tell no one outside this room what you know. No one. Clara thought about Thomas, who had spent a morning at the creek with Pryor, and had the particular bright-eyed expression of a boy who has absorbed more than anyone intended. She would need to talk to him. She would need to talk to him carefully. That night, after Lily was in bed, and Pryor had retired to the spare room, and the house had settled into its nighttime quiet, Clara found Thomas still awake in the loft, lying on his back, looking at the ceiling with his arms behind his head. You're supposed to be asleep, she said. I know, he said. He did not pretend to have been trying. She climbed the loft ladder and sat at the top of it, not fully in the loft, just her shoulders and head above the floor level, an awkward position that she chose deliberately because it put her at his level without crowding him. He looked at her sideways. It's Caldwell, he said. Isn't it? The woman who keeps coming here. She looked at him for a long moment. He was 9 years old and had the kind of intelligence that runs ahead of what the people around him think he can handle. Lying to him would not protect him. It would only teach him that the adults in his life weren't straight with him. We think so, she said. Yes, her and some others. She smiled at me at church, he said. She always smiled at me. She used to tell Papa what a fine son he had. His voice was flat, not hurt, but the careful flatness of someone processing something ugly and not wanting to seem naive about it. People who want something from your father would be kind to you, Clara said. That doesn't mean the kindness was false. It means the kindness wasn't the whole truth. He thought about that. Is she going to try to stop you before Mr. Pryor can do whatever he's going to do? I don't know, Clara said. We're trying to move quickly enough that she can't. What can I do? He said. She looked at him. You tell me if you see anything unusual on the property. Anyone riding the fence line who isn't us. Any cattle that aren't ours coming onto the east pasture. Anything that seems like someone is checking on us who isn't supposed to be. He nodded. This was the kind of task he could hold specific practical something with edges he could understand. I can do that. And you don't say anything about any of this, she said. Not at school, not to any of the town kids, not even to Carl Reeves's son if he asks you anything. Billy Reeves doesn't know anything, Thomas said. His father does now, Clara said. And children tell each other things without meaning to, so just be careful. I was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Are we going to be okay? She looked at him straight. I believe so, she said. I won't tell you it's certain because it isn't. But I believe so. And I am going to do everything I can to make sure of it. He nodded again, the same firm nod as always. Made up mind. No need to revisit. Okay, he said. Go to sleep, Clara. You look tired. She almost smiled. She climbed back down the ladder and went to bed. She did not sleep for a long time. The following morning was when it went wrong. Pryor had ridden into town at first light to file a preliminary motion at the county clerk's office, a technical filing that would formally place the easement dispute in active litigation, which would legally prevent any transaction involving the affected property from proceeding without court review. It was a protective move, quiet and procedural, the kind of thing that could be filed without drawing immediate attention if the clerk simply processed it as standard paperwork and did not immediately pass the information along. The clerk was not the same young man Clara had spoken to. He was an older man, and his name was Gerald Tipton, and Pryor recognized him from years ago, and knew the moment he saw him that Tipton and Roy Marsh were the kind of men who had lunched together for a decade and told each other everything. Pryor filed the motion anyway. He had no choice. It was the correct legal step, and delaying it would weaken the case. But he rode back to the ranch at a pace considerably faster than the one he'd ridden into town. Tipton will have told Marsh by noon, he said, dismounting in the yard, while Ethan and Clara both came out to meet him. Which means Marsh will have told the Caldwells by this afternoon. We have a window of hours, not days. Hours, Ethan said. What needs to happen before the window closes? Clara said. Pryor looked at her. Carl Reeves needs to come here and make a formal statement to me today. I need it witnessed and documented. If Marsh moves to accelerate your loan before I can get the fraud evidence to the territorial court. We need Reeves's corroboration on file, already a statement taken before any coercion could have occurred. I'll ride to Reeves, Ethan said immediately. Take Thomas, Clara said. Both men looked at her. Carl Reeves trusts Ethan, but Thomas has been to the Reeves place a dozen times, and Billy Reeves is his closest friend. If this is urgent and you need Carl to drop everything and come today, having Thomas there makes it more likely that Carl Reeves will understand the urgency without you having to explain every detail. She paused. And it keeps Thomas off this property for the next few hours, which I'd prefer. Ethan held her gaze. Then he called Thomas from the barn. The two of them rode out within 10 minutes. Clara turned to Pryor. What else? The water diversion documentation, he said. I need a second witness to its existence. Someone who's seen it and can attest to its deliberate construction. Thomas was there, she said. He's 9, Pryor said. I need an adult. I haven't seen it, she said. But I can see it now if you can ride out in the next hour. Pryor looked at her for a beat. You'd be a witness in a territorial court proceeding. Yes, she said. Miss Whitfield, these are powerful men. Once you put your name on this. Mr. Pryor, she said, I found the ledger. I found the payment discrepancy. I organized the evidence that you drove 2 days from Billings to evaluate. My name is already on this whether I sign a witness statement or not. She looked at him steadily. Saddle back up. Let's go see the creek. They rode out. She saw the diversion for the first time at the northern curve of Cutter Creek, and she understood immediately why no one had questioned it for 4 years. It looked at a distance exactly like what it claimed to be flood remediation bank stabilization, the kind of practical construction a careful landowner might put in to protect an eroding water source. It was only when you looked at the angle of the redirected channel, at the deliberate shaping of the stonework, at the way the barrier had been built, not to hold water in, but to redirect it out, that the intent became clear. She walked the full length of it while Pryor made notes. "This was engineered," she said. "Someone who knew what they were doing built this." "The Double C employed a man named Vernon Price about 5 years ago," Pryor said. "He had a background in irrigation engineering. He left Margaret Caldwell's employ about 3 years ago and moved to Wyoming." He paused. "I found this in a land registry from '81 when I was preparing for this trip. I hadn't told Ethan yet." Clara looked at him. "You've been ahead of this the whole time." "I had some of it," he said. "You had the rest. Between us, we have all of it." He looked at her steadily. "Are you ready to sign the statement?" She looked at the diversion. She looked at the water moving, not the way it should move, not the way Ethan's cattle needed it to move, but eastward, redirected, stolen in plain sight for 4 years, while a man's ranch dried, and a family grieved, and a group of careful, patient people waited for the right moment to move in on what they had methodically ruined. "Yes," she said. "I'm ready." They were halfway back to the ranch when they saw the rider. Howe was coming hard from the south road. Not a familiar horse, not a familiar posture, and he pulled up when he saw them, and something in the way he hesitated told Clara everything before he said a word. He was not a neighbor. He was not someone passing through. He had been sent. Howe was a young man no more than 25, with the particular stiff bearing of someone carrying a message he's been told to deliver, and has been told what to say if he encounters the recipients before he reaches the destination. "Mr. Pryor," he said. Pryor pulled his horse up. "Yes. Roy Marsh sends his compliments," the young man said. "He'd like you to know that the motion you filed this morning has been received and reviewed, and he'd like to arrange a meeting at his earliest convenience to discuss an amicable resolution to the situation." Clara kept her face perfectly neutral. Pryor said, "Tell Mr. Marsh I appreciate the courtesy. I'll be in touch through the proper channels." The young man looked like he had expected something more, a conversation perhaps, or an agreement to meet, or at least some sign of hesitation. He had received a polite, complete, entirely committed refusal. He nodded, turned his horse and rode back south. Pryor watched him go. "Amicable resolution," he said. "He's scared," Clara said. "Terrified," Pryor agreed. "A man offers amicable resolution when he knows the other party has enough to bury him, and he'd prefer to negotiate the terms of how deeply." He turned to look at her. "Marsh just confirmed for us that Tipton told him what was in that filing, and that he understands exactly what it means. Will he try to block the filing somehow?" "He can try," Pryor said. "But that motion is already in the territorial court system, not just the local office. Gerald Tipton can talk all he wants. He cannot unfile a territorial court motion." He nudged his horse forward. "Let's get back. I need to write some letters before Carl Reeves arrives." When they rode into the yard, Clara heard it before she saw it. Lily's voice, sharp and high, coming from the front porch. Not crying. Louder than crying. The particular pitch of a child who has walked into something she was not supposed to walk into and is not handling it quietly. Clara swung down from her horse before it had fully stopped. She came around the corner of the house and found Lily on the porch, with her fists clenched at her sides, and Margaret Caldwell standing in the yard below the steps, holding her mare's reins, looking up at the child with an expression that had moved entirely past pleasantness into something that had nothing to warm it. "Where is your father?" Caldwell was saying. "He's not here," Lily said. Her voice was shaking with the effort of holding the rest of herself still. And Clara said, "I don't have to talk to anyone I don't want to talk to." "Clara," Caldwell said, "is not your mother." It hit Lily like a slap. Clara saw the girl's whole body take the impact of it, the flinch that went through her from her shoulders down. And then she watched something remarkable happen. Lily Walker, 7 years old, with her mama's hands and her father's jaw, pulled herself back up to full height and looked down at Margaret Caldwell from the top of that porch with eyes that had stopped shaking entirely. "No," Lily said. "She's not. But she's here, and you need to leave." Clara stepped up beside Lily on the porch. She did not say anything. She put her hand on Lily's shoulder, one hand light steady, and she looked at Margaret Caldwell, and she waited. Caldwell looked at them both. Something shifted in her expression, not retreat, but the particular recalculation of a person who has just discovered that the situation has changed while they were not watching. She looked at Clara with different eyes than she had ever used before. Not dismissal, not contempt, something closer to genuine assessment. "We need to talk," Caldwell said. Her voice was lower now. "There is nothing you and I need to discuss," Clara said. "There is everything we need to discuss," Caldwell said. "You have no idea what you've put in motion." "I know exactly what I've put in motion," Clara said. "And so do you. That's why you're here." Caldwell's jaw tightened. "This is going to get ugly," she said. "What Ethan is about to do, what Pryor is about to file Roy Marsh, is not a man who accepts loss gracefully. He has resources, and he has connections, and he will use them. If you think a filing in the territorial court is going to make him fold quietly, you are more naive than you look." "I don't think anything will be quiet," Clara said. "I never expected quiet." "Then you know that Ethan is putting himself in the middle of something he cannot control. Ethan Walker is putting himself in the middle of something that was done to him without his knowledge," Clara said. "That is different. And Mr. Pryor has considerably more experience with territorial court proceedings than Roy Marsh has in facing them." She held Caldwell's gaze. "You should go home, Miss Caldwell. Whatever conversation you were hoping to have here today, it isn't going to happen." Caldwell stood in the yard for a long moment. She looked at Lily, still standing beside Clara, with her fists unclenched now and her chin level. She looked at Clara one more time, and in that look was something Clara had not seen from her before, a kind of weary, unwilling recognition, the look of someone who has underestimated a person and is being forced to revise. Then she mounted her mare and rode away. Lily waited until she was gone. Then she turned and pressed her face against Clara's shoulder for exactly 2 seconds. Not a hug, not a long embrace, just a single moment of letting someone solid be between her and the world. Then she straightened back up. "She said you're not my mother," Lily said. "She's right," Clara said. "I'm not." "But you're not going to leave," Lily said. It was not a question. "No," Clara said. "I'm not going to leave." Lily nodded. She went inside. Clara stood on the porch alone for a moment. The Montana wind was picking up from the west, a different quality than the morning wind, heavier, carrying moisture, and she looked at the sky and thought, weather's changing. Then she thought, everything's changing. Then she went inside to help Pryor with his letters. Ethan came back with Carl Reeves at mid-afternoon. Reeves was a compact, weathered man of about 50, who moved with the careful deliberateness of someone who has done hard physical labor for 30 years and whose body has made peace with the cost of it. He shook Pryor's hand and sat at this kitchen table and answered every question with the direct, unembellished brevity of a man who has been raised to say what he knows and stop talking when he doesn't know more. His receipts were in the tobacco tin, exactly as Ethan had described 2 of them, March and July dates, matching Ethan's discrepancies, matching the pattern. When Pryor read the final statement back to him and asked him to sign it, Reeves picked up the pen without hesitating. "I should have looked into this sooner," Reeves said. "I knew something wasn't right. I didn't want it to be what it is." "Most people don't," Pryor said. "That's what they count on." Reeves looked across the table at Clara. "Ethan says you're the one who found it," he said. "Ethan found it with me," she said. "It was a joint effort." Reeves looked at her for a long moment. Then he said in the plain-spoken way of a Montana rancher who does not give compliments easily, "I'm glad you came." She nodded once. It was enough. After Reeves left and Pryor had sealed his letters, and Thomas had come inside with the news that 2 riders had passed along the east fence line that afternoon. Not stopping, not approaching, just passing and looking. The house was very quiet, in the way that things are quiet before they move. Ethan stood in the kitchen after supper and looked at Clara across the table, and she looked back at him, and neither of them said anything for a moment. The lamp was between them. Thomas and Lily were in their rooms. Pryor was at the writing table in the spare room. Outside, the wind that Clara had noticed from the porch had built into something heavier and was pressing at the windows with a low, continuous sound. "You were right," Ethan said. "About all of it. About going to Billings, about Pryor, about the creek, about Caldwell, all of it." "We were right," she said. You kept the receipts. Your father's ranch records had the ledger. Carl Reeves kept his tobacco tin. None of this works without all of it. Clara, he said. Ethan, she said. He looked at her with that expression she still hadn't found a name for, and this time she let herself look back at it fully, without redirecting, without finding some practical thing to turn toward. She let it be what it was for a moment, that look between the two of them in the lamplight, with the wind outside, and the children in their rooms, and the whole weight of everything that was not yet resolved, still pressing at the walls. After this is done, he said. When Pryor has filed everything, and the court has done what it's going to do, and this ranch is when it's safe, I want to talk to you. About what? She said. About what this is, he said. What we are. She held his gaze. She said, after it's done. He nodded. After it's done. He agreed. But neither of them moved from the table for another long while, and the lamp burned between them, and outside the Montana wind built itself into a storm. The storm hit before midnight. Clara heard it come in the way storms announce themselves on the Montana plain. Not with gradual buildup, but with a single gust that rattled every window in the house, simultaneously followed by the kind of silence that means the real thing is 10 seconds behind. She was already sitting up in her bed when the second wave hit, and she had her boots on before the third. She came out of her room into the kitchen and found Ethan already there, pulling on his coat in the dark, moving with the quick, certain efficiency of a man who has weathered enough Montana storms to know exactly which ones require him to get outside immediately. The cattle, he said. I know, she said. Thomas D. Loft. He's awake, I heard him moving. Ethan grabbed the lantern from the shelf and lit it in one practiced motion. Stay with Lily. Lily can stay with Pryor, Clara said. I'm coming. He looked at her for 1 second, not arguing, just measuring, and then he said, stay close to the barn wall in the wind. Don't go past the water trough without telling me where you're going. Understood, she said. They went out together. The wind was something physical, not weather, but force, the kind that leans against you with intent and makes every step a decision. Ethan kept the lantern low and shielded with his body, and they crossed the yard to the barn, and inside the barn the horses were moving nervous and tight in their stalls, and the sound of the cattle in the near paddock was already wrong too. Spread too far. The particular lowing of animals that have found a gap and are in the process of deciding whether to use it. West fence, Ethan said. I was right. The west section. The one with the post he had replaced after Clara pointed out the rot, but with 3 additional posts that had been on the list for weeks and had not yet been done, had given in the first serious wind of the season. Clara found the gap before Ethan did, moving along the fence line with the lantern while he checked the paddock count. 4 posts down in a 15-foot section. The cattle had not gone far yet. The storm had confused them as much as freed them, but they were drifting, and in a storm with no visibility and rough terrain. To the west, drifting cattle became a problem that compounded itself quickly. Thomas! Ethan shouted over the wind. Thomas appeared from the barn door. He had dressed himself completely, coat and boots and hat, pulled down against the wind, and he had a coil of rope over one shoulder that he had taken from the tack room without being told. Take the near side, Ethan told him. Keep them from going past the water trough. Don't chase them, just hold the line. Yes, sir, Thomas said and went. Clara and Ethan worked the fence in the dark and the wind with the particular focused urgency of people who do not have the luxury of doing anything less than exactly what needs to be done. She held posts while he drove them, and she learned quickly that holding a post in wind-driven ground meant using her whole body, leaning into it, ignoring what the jarring of the mallet did to her arms and hands, because the post needed to be still, and she was the thing keeping it still. By the time the first section was closed, she could not feel her left hand properly. She did not stop. They lost 11 cattle that night. Found 8 of them by the time the storm broke at 4 in the morning, scattered in various directions, corralled by Thomas and by Pryor, who had appeared in the yard at 1 in the morning without being asked, in a lawyer's coat, wholly unsuited to the work, and had nevertheless spent 3 hours in the dark, helping Ethan run down cattle with a stolid, uncomplaining competence that moved up considerably in Clara's estimation. 3 cattle were still missing at dawn. Ethan stood at the broken fence line in the gray morning light, looking at the western range where the grass was bent flat from the wind, and Clara stood beside him and waited. "I'll find them today," he said. "The fence first," she said. "Then you'll find them." He looked at her. There were circles under his eyes and mud on his coat, and he had a cut on his left hand from a piece of wire in the dark that he had not mentioned, and probably would not mention, unless she asked directly. "Your hand," she said. "It's fine. Let me see it." He held it out without arguing, which told her he was too tired to maintain a position. The cut was on the palm, not deep, but long, and it had bled more than it should because it had been pressed against fence wire and cold ground for 3 hours. She cleaned it in the kitchen with the calm efficiency of someone who has dealt with worse, and bandaged it with strips of cotton, while he sat at the table and drank the coffee she had put in front of him, and looked at the table with the expression of a man totaling losses. 11 heads scattered, he said. 3 missing. The west fence needs 4 new posts minimum. The storm took part of the barn roof on the east side. I saw it when we came in. He set the coffee down. And Pryor needs to be in Billings by the end of the week to file the full brief. Then he goes to Billings, Clara said. And we fix the fence and find the cattle. With what? He said. It came out flat, not dramatic, just the plain question of a man adding numbers that are not adding up. Clara, I've been keeping this ranch on the edge of the line for 2 years. The storm damage alone, the posts, the roof repair, the time lost. I don't have the margin for this. Not right now. Not with the loan payment due in 3 weeks. How much is the payment? She said. He told her. She sat down across from him. She looked at her hands, bandaged left one, calloused right one, and she thought about the 3 piles of paper on this table, and the ledger, and the filing in the territorial court, and the look on Pryor's face when he'd said, "This is better than I expected," and the look on Carl Reeves's face when he'd said, "I'm glad you came." "The Walker Ranch has been here for 18 years, she said. "Your father built this on land that had nothing on it and turned it into something. You kept it alive through a bad winter and your wife's death and 2 years of drought and a scheme that was designed specifically to make you fail." She looked at him. 3 weeks is enough time. We'll find a way." "You keep saying that," he said. "Because it keeps being true," she said. He looked at her across the table for a long moment. Then something in his face shifted, not breaking, more like releasing the way a rope releases tension when the weight it was holding is finally set down somewhere solid. "I don't know how to do this without you anymore," he said. He said it quietly, plainly, the way he said everything that mattered, without preparation or decoration, just the statement itself carried straight across the table. Clara was very still. "Ethan," she said. "I know," he said. "After it's done, I know what I said." He picked up the coffee. "I just wanted you to know that." She looked at him for a moment. Then she said, "Fix your fence. Find your cattle. I'll handle the rest." He almost smiled. It was the closest thing to a smile she had seen on him since the night they had stayed up past midnight with the lamp burning, and it moved something in her chest that she was not ready to look at directly. He went to fix the fence. The way she handled the rest was this. She went to see Pryor before he left for Billings, and she asked him 2 specific questions. The first was whether the fraud evidence, if upheld by the territorial court, would result in any recovery for damages to the affected landowners. Pryor said yes, not certainly, not immediately, but yes. A successful fraud judgment typically included provisions for restitution of documented losses. The second question was whether there was any legal mechanism to delay the loan payment deadline while the fraud case was under active review. Pryor looked at her with an expression that said he had been hoping someone would ask exactly this question. "An injunction," he said. "If we can demonstrate that the loan itself was issued as part of a fraudulent scheme, and I believe we can demonstrate exactly that, then we can petition the territorial court to freeze all financial obligations associated with the affected properties pending resolution." He paused. "I should have mentioned this sooner." "You had a lot to file," she said. "I'm going to add it to the brief," he said. "It's the strongest protective mechanism we have between now and the court date." "How long will the injunction take?" "If the judge sees the evidence the way I expect him to, 10 days. 2 weeks at the outside." The payment is due in 3 weeks, she said. Then we have time, he said. But I need to ride today. He rode that morning. He shook Ethan's hand in the yard and told him the plan, and Ethan listened with his arms crossed and his jaw set, and nodded once at the end, in the way that meant he understood and accepted, and was not going to waste words saying so. Then he shook Pryor's hand again, which was not something Clara had seen him do twice with the same person, and Pryor seemed to understand what the second handshake meant. 3 days after Pryor left, Roy Marsh made his move. It did not come through the bank. It came through the county sheriff. The sheriff of Millhaven County was a man named Earl Dodd, and he arrived at the Walker Ranch on a Thursday afternoon with a deputy and a folded document, and the carefully neutral expression of a man who is carrying out an order he has not decided how to feel about. He was not a cruel man. Clara had seen him twice in town, and he had the bearing of someone who had taken the job because the county needed someone reliable, and had discovered over the years that reliable often meant uncomfortable. He knocked on the door. Clara answered it. "Ma'am," he said. He tipped his hat. "Is Ethan Walker on the property?" "He's in the barn," she said. "What's this regarding?" "I have a notice of default acceleration from the Millhaven Savings and Loan," he said. He said it the way someone says a thing they have been told to say and would prefer to have not been told. "Mr. Marsh has submitted a claim that the October loan payment was received late, and that under the terms of the original agreement, the bank is entitled to call the full balance due within 30 days. Clara looked at him steadily. "That payment was not late," she said. "We have the receipt." "Ma'am, I understand, but my job is to serve the notice," Dodd said. "The legal question of whether the payment was late or not is for the territorial court," Clara said. "Yes, which is currently reviewing this exact issue." She paused. "Sheriff Dodd, did you know that Mr. Marsh's loan records show several payment entries that don't match the dated receipts from his borrowers? Did you know that the county land commissioner's signature appears on an improperly filed easement document that a Billings attorney is currently presenting to a territorial judge?" Dodd went very still. "I'm going to go get Ethan," she said. "Please wait here." She went to the barn and told Ethan in 6 words, "Sheriff's here." Default notice, Marsh, and watched him pull himself to full height and walk out of the barn with the particular calm of a man who has been expecting this and has decided how he is going to handle it. He listened to Dodd read the notice without interrupting. Then he said, "Earl." "Ethan," Dodd said. "How long have we known each other?" Dodd looked at him. 15 years. "Have I ever been a dishonest man?" A pause. "No," Dodd said. "You have not." "I have receipts for every payment I have ever made to that bank," Ethan said. "Dated, stamped, witnessed. My attorney is in Billings right now presenting evidence to a territorial court that Roy Marsh has been altering payment records and falsifying land filings and diverting water from my creek onto Caldwell land for 4 years. He held Dodd's gaze. "You serve that notice if you have to. I understand you have a job to do, but I want you to know what you're serving and who asked you to serve it." Dodd stood in the yard with the notice in his hand and looked at Ethan Walker for a long time. Then he folded the notice. He put it back in his coat pocket. "I seem to have misplaced this document," he said. "I'll need to sort out some paperwork before I can formally serve anything. Probably take me the better part of a week to locate it again." He tipped his hat to Clara. He rode away. Ethan watched him go. Then he turned to Clara and said nothing for a moment. "That buys us time," she said. "That bought us Earl Dodd's conscience," Ethan said. "That's worth more than time." She nodded. She went back inside. The next blow came from a direction she had not anticipated, and it came through Thomas. He came in from school on Friday afternoon, and he was quiet in a different way than his usual quiet. Not the comfortable quiet of a boy who is thinking, but the tight wound-up quiet of a boy who is holding something painful. Clara saw it the moment he came through the door. She did not ask immediately. She let him hang his coat and get a glass of water and stand at the kitchen window for a moment, before she said from the stove where she was working, "What happened?" He turned around. His face was carefully controlled, but there was something working behind his eyes that was too big for 9 years old. "Billy Reeves said his pa told him to stay away from me," he said. "At school, in front of everyone." Clara set down what she was holding. What do you mean? Billy said his pa told him that the Walkers are going to lose the ranch and that anyone who's too close to us when it happens is going to get pulled into the trouble. Thomas's voice was very even. She could hear what the evenness was costing him. Billy's been my best friend since first grade. She crossed to the table and sat down across from him. Come sit, she said. He sat. He pressed his hands flat against the table, the way she did when she needed to think, and she noticed that without being sure where he had learned it. Carl Reeves is scared, she said. He signed that statement for Mr. Pryor because he was brave enough to do the right thing, but he's still scared. Scared people sometimes protect their children in ways that aren't fair to other people's children. He made Billy say it in front of everyone, Thomas said, in front of the whole class. I know. People are going to think we're losing, he said. If Carl Reeves is telling his kid to stay away, other people will hear that and think, Thomas, she said. He stopped. Look at me, she said. He looked. Are we losing? He held her gaze. He thought about it, really thought the way his father thought going through it fully before he answered. No, he said. No, she said. We are not. We have a lawyer filing in the territorial court. We have evidence that Roy Marsh has been committing fraud. We have Sheriff Dodd's conscience on our side. And we have Carl Reeves's signed statement, which he gave us before he got scared, and which is now on a judge's desk in Billings. She paused. Carl Reeves can tell his son whatever he needs to tell him. That statement still exists. It still says what it says. Thomas was quiet. Then, is Billy going to stay away from me? She was quiet for a moment. I don't know, she said. I hope not, but I can't promise you that. I hate this, he said, very quietly, very honestly. I know, she said. It is genuinely completely unfair, and you are allowed to feel all of that. She held his gaze. And then tomorrow, you go back to school, and you hold your head up because you are Thomas Walker, and your family has not done one single dishonest thing, and the truth of that doesn't change based on what Billy Reeves says in a classroom. He held her gaze for a long moment. Then he nodded that single firm nod. Decision made. Okay, he said. He got up and went to do his evening chores without being asked. She sat at the table for a moment after he left and pressed her hands flat against the wood and breathed. This was the part no one saw when they talked about strength. Not the fence posts and the water trough and the receipts and the ledger. This, a 9-year-old boy sitting across from her, trying not to cry about his best friend. This was the weight of it. This was the thing that required more than any physical effort she had made since arriving. She got up. She went back to the stove. There was supper to make. It was Lily who first understood what was happening in town. She came home the following day. Saturday. No school. She had gone with Ethan to the general store for the week's supplies, and she went directly to Clara in the kitchen and said without preamble, "People are saying things about you." Clara looked at her. What kind of things? Mrs. Aldrich, Commissioner Aldrich's wife. She was at the store with Mrs. Marsh, and they were talking to Mrs. Fletcher, and they said... Lily stopped. She was holding something folded in her hand, Clara noticed. A piece of paper. They said you came here with nothing, and now you're trying to cause trouble between the good people of this town and a respected businessman, and that you don't understand how things work in Millhaven, and you're going to get Papa in serious trouble. Ethan appeared in this kitchen doorway. He had heard this much at least, and his expression was controlled but tight. They said you manipulated Papa, Lily said. She looked at Clara with very direct eyes. They said you came here with nowhere to go, and you saw an opportunity, and you've been manipulating this whole situation for your own benefit. And what do you think? Clara said. Lily looked at her for a long moment. She held out the folded piece of paper. I think they left this at the store counter. I think someone put it there on purpose knowing Papa was coming in today. She paused. I took it before he could see it. I didn't want him to get angry in the store. Clara took the paper. She unfolded it. It was a single page, handwritten in a neat, careful script that had no signature at the bottom. It said, "A word of friendly warning to Ethan Walker. The woman you have taken into your home is known in St. Louis. not as a reliable domestic worker, but as a woman who inserts herself into vulnerable households for personal gain. Inquiries have been made. Her references are not what she represented them to be. A man in your position with children to protect would do well to ask himself what he truly knows about the woman sleeping under his roof. Clara read it twice. She folded it. She set it on the table. She looked at Ethan. He was looking at the folded paper. His jaw was working. "They had this printed and placed where I'd find it," he said. "They're scared," she said. "Pryor is getting close and they know it, and they're trying to destabilize the situation from the inside." She paused. "This is the move people make when they're running out of real moves." "It's a lie," he said. "Yes," she said. "It is. I don't need to ask what I know about you," he said. He said it simply, directly, with the same weight he put behind everything that mattered. "I know what you've done in this house, and for my children, and for this ranch. I know every morning and every evening and every document on that table. I don't need a piece of paper from an anonymous source to tell me who you are." She looked at him. She was not a woman who cried easily. She had trained herself out of it in houses where crying meant weakness, and weakness meant losing the position you needed to eat. But something in the way he said it, the absolute unqualified certainty of it, as though the question had not even been a question, did something to the back of her throat that she had to press down deliberately. "Thank you," she said. "Don't thank me for knowing the truth," he said. Lily was looking at both of them. She looked at her father, and then at Clara, and then she picked up the folded paper from the table and walked to the hearth and put it in the fire. She stood and watched it burn. "Good," she said, and went back to her room. Ethan looked at the fire. Then he looked at Clara. "My daughter just handled that better than I did," he said. "She handles a lot of things better than people expect," Clara said. He almost smiled. Then he said, "Pryor should be back by Wednesday." "Wednesday," she said. "We can hold until Wednesday." But Tuesday morning brought something none of them had planned for. A rider came from Billings, not Pryor, but a young man from Pryor's office riding hard, who arrived at the ranch at 8 in the morning and asked for Ethan Walker and handed him a sealed letter when he came out. Clara watched Ethan read it. She watched his face. She had learned to read his face. She knew the difference between his thinking through expression and his something is wrong expression, and what moved across him as he read that letter was something she had not seen before. Not fear exactly, but the look of a person who has been playing a careful game and has just discovered that the board has been flipped. He handed her the letter. She read it. Pryor wrote in his precise, structured way, but even through the legal language, she could feel the urgency in it. The territorial court judge who had received the brief was Judge Alan Carter, a man Pryor had worked with before, a fair and thorough judge with an excellent record. 3 days ago, Judge Carter had been visited in his chambers by a prominent Helena attorney representing a coalition of Millhaven businessmen led by Roy Marsh. This attorney had filed a counterpetition challenging the validity of the easement brief on the grounds that the original filing contained material gathered through improper access to county records. Improper access. Clara felt it like cold water. The records office, the young clerk, the copies she had made so carefully explaining she was confused about a property description and wasn't sure she was reading it correctly. Someone had told Marsh. The young clerk, or someone who had seen her there, had told Marsh, and Marsh had used it to build a challenge to the admissibility of the evidence she had copied. She read the rest of the letter. Pryor had not folded. The counterpetition was challengeable. Her access had been entirely legal. She had not misrepresented her right to view public records, and the copies she had made were of documents that any member of the public was entitled to examine. But the challenge had caused Judge Carter to pause the proceedings pending a hearing on admissibility, which was scheduled for 2 weeks out. 2 weeks out. The loan payment was in 10 days. She set the letter down. "The injunction," she said. "The admissibility challenge pauses it," Ethan said. He had already understood. He had read faster than she had. "While the court is reviewing whether my evidence is properly admissible, they won't issue the injunction, which means the loan payment deadline is active and unprotected for 10 days. And if Marsh accelerates the default through the sheriff, Earl Dodd can only hold that document for so long before he has to serve it, Ethan said. He bought us 1 week on his conscience. He can't buy us 2. They looked at each other. The writer from Pryor's office was still in the yard waiting to see if there was a return message. Tell him to tell Pryor we received it, Ethan said to Clara. Tell him we're looking at options. She went to the door and relayed the message. The writer left. When she came back, Ethan was at the table with both hands pressed flat on the surface, looking at nothing. She sat down across from him. Options, she said. I don't have 10 days of cash in reserve, he said. I don't have any cash reserve. What I have is cattle and land and a water source that someone has been stealing from for 4 years. The cattle, she said. He looked up. What would 11 head sell for at current prices, she said, at the fall rate. He did a calculation that was clearly automatic, the kind of mental arithmetic a rancher does the way other people breathe. He said the number. It was close. Not enough on its own, but close. Carl Reeves, she said. Carl Reeves is already scared, Ethan said. I can't ask him. He owes this ranch, she said. Not unkindly, but directly. Not because you helped him, or because you're friends, he owes it, because your evidence is the reason his own situation has any protection at all. His signed statement is what makes this a pattern and not a single case. She paused. I'm not saying demand. I'm saying ask, man to man. Tell him what you need and let him decide. Ethan was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, Who else? The community, she said. Millhaven has people in it who are not Roy Marsh and not Margaret Caldwell. People who have watched this ranch for 18 years. People who, even if they weren't sure about me when I arrived, know who you are and know this land should stay yours. She leaned forward. Ethan, your father built this place and this town watched him do it. They are not all against you. I'm not a man who asks for help, he said. I know, she said. I've noticed. He looked at her. Ask, she said. Just this once. Just enough. Pride is a luxury that requires a better situation than this one. He held her gaze for a long moment. Something shifted in him, not breaking, not surrendering more, like a man choosing very deliberately to set down something heavy that he has been carrying so long he forgot he was carrying it. All right, he said. He rode to Carl Reeves that afternoon. He came back at dusk with Carl Reeves riding beside him. Clara came out to this porch when she heard the horses and Reeves swung down and looked at her with the direct, slightly rough expression of a man who has spent the last 2 hours wrestling with something and has come out the other side of it. I told my boy the wrong thing, he said, about staying away from Thomas. That wasn't right and I'm going to fix it. He paused. And I'm going to help with the payment. Not all of it, I can't do all of it. But I can do my part. Thank you, Carl, she said. Don't thank me, he said. I should have done this sooner. I should have looked at my own receipts sooner and asked more questions and been braver about it. He pulled off his hat and held it against his chest. My wife's family homesteaded this valley 30 years ago. Roy Marsh is not going to be the man who decides what this valley stands for. He and Ethan went inside. Clara stayed on the porch for a moment. The evening was still and cool, and she could hear the horses in the paddock, and somewhere out on the range, one of the recovered cattle, making the easy settled sound of an animal that has found its way home. 2 days later, the Bauer family came. Old Man Bauer arrived at the ranch in his wagon on a Thursday morning with his wife beside him and his eldest son on horseback alongside. And he stepped down from the wagon and removed his hat and said to Ethan in his careful, accented English, We have thought about what you asked. My family has decided. We will speak to the lawyer. Thomas came out of the barn and saw Billy Reeves in the yard. Carl Reeves had brought him along this morning, a deliberate, quiet correction from a father who knew he had done wrong by his son and was trying to undo it without making a speech about it. The two boys looked at each other. Billy Reeves said, You want to go check the east fence? Thomas said, Yeah, and they went together, neither of them saying another word about any of it. Clara watched them go. Ethan came to stand beside her. The Bauers, he said quietly. That's 3 families. That's a pattern, she said. That's what Pryor needed. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You knew they'd come." "I hoped," she said. "I didn't know." "You told me to ask," he said. "You said pride is a luxury." "It is." "You've been right about most things," he said. "Not everything," she said. "I was wrong about how quickly Marsh would move. I underestimated how scared he'd get." "You adjusted," he said. "You adjust," she said. "That's what you do when the situation changes. You don't stop, you adjust." He looked at her sideways. "Is that what you did when you arrived here? When I told you in front of half the town that you weren't what I asked for?" She looked at the yard, the Bowers by the porch. Carl Reeves talking with Ethan's horses, like a man who finds animals easier than people. Thomas and Billy disappearing around the eastern fence line. "I adjusted," she said. "I was cruel, he said. "You were honest," she said. "Poorly timed, but honest. I was not what you asked for." "You were exactly what I needed," he said. "That's different from what I asked for." She was quiet. He turned to face her. He was not hiding what was in his expression anymore, not smoothing it into something neutral, or redirecting to the next practical thing. He was just looking at her the way he looked at things he had decided about. Clear, direct, certain. "After this is done," he said. "You keep saying that," she said. "Because I keep meaning it," he said. "And because you keep reminding me that there are more important things to deal with first. And you're right. And I respect that. But I want you to know that I am not going to forget to say it." He paused. "After this is done, I am going to ask you something, and I am hoping very much that you are going to say yes." She looked at him for a long moment. She thought about the road the day she arrived. She thought about picking up her suitcase with both hands and walking past him toward the house because she had nowhere else to go. She thought about the kitchen, the biscuits, the ledger, the creek, the lamp burning between them at midnight. She thought about Lily pressing her face against her shoulder for 2 seconds and then straightening up and facing the world again. She thought about Thomas pressing his hands flat on the table the way she did. "After this is done," she said. And she went inside to help the Bowers with their statement. That evening, when the yard had emptied and the children were fed and the house had gone quiet, Ethan sat at the kitchen table with a letter from Pryor that had arrived that afternoon. He read it once. He set it down. "Pryor has what he needs," he said. 3 families. The Bauer statement pushed it. He's going back to Judge Carter tomorrow with the completed brief and an argument that the admissibility challenge is without merit and designed to delay rather than serve justice. "And the injunction," Clara said. "He thinks Carter will grant it once the admissibility question is cleared," he said. "He's filing for an emergency hearing." "When will we know?" "Few days," he said. "Maybe a week." She nodded. He looked at the letter. Then he looked at her. "This is almost over," he said. "Not yet," she said. "No," he said. "Not yet." But the shape of it was there. She could feel it in the room, the way she had felt the storm coming in that wind, change 3 weeks ago. The shape of something that was going to be that had not arrived yet, but was no longer far away. And sitting at that table in the lamplight with the Walker Ranch holding around them, and the children asleep in their rooms, and 3 families' worth of courage folded into a lawyer's brief in Billings. Clara Whitfield allowed herself for the first time since she had stepped off that stagecoach to believe that the thing she had been working toward might actually hold. She did not say it. She just sat there and let herself believe it. That was enough. The letter from Pryor came on a Friday morning, and Clara knew what it said before Ethan finished reading it. She knew from the way his shoulders changed, not dropping, not tensing, but releasing the particular release of a man who has been braced against something for so long that letting go of the brace feels strange and new, and almost frightening in its unfamiliarity. He stood at the kitchen table with the letter in both hands, and he read it twice, and then he set it down and looked at it for a moment. The way you look at something you need to make sure is real. "The injunction was granted," he said. Clara set down the coffee pot. "Judge Carter granted the emergency injunction yesterday morning," Ethan continued. "The admissibility challenge was dismissed. Carter ruled that public records accessed through the county clerk's office are available to any member of the public, and that no impropriety occurred." He looked up at her. The loan payment deadline is frozen pending full resolution of the fraud case. Marsh cannot move on the default. She sat down. Not dramatically, she simply sat the way a person sits when their legs have decided that standing is no longer the priority. And the fraud case, she said. Carter is assigning it to the Territorial Court's Civil Division, Ethan said. Full hearing in 6 weeks. Pryor says the evidence we have, the payment discrepancies, the easement filing error, the water diversion documentation, the 3 family statements is sufficient for Carter to have already issued a preliminary finding of probable cause. He paused. Roy Marsh, James Aldrich, Robert Caldwell, and Margaret Caldwell have all been formally notified that they are parties to the proceeding. The kitchen was very quiet. It's not over, Clara said. No, Ethan said. 6 weeks to the hearing. Pryor says there'll be pressure. There'll be lawyers and counter-arguments, and people trying to chip away at the evidence. He says we need to be prepared for it to get uncomfortable before it gets resolved. We've been uncomfortable, she said. Yes, he said. We have. He looked at her across the table. The same table where they had spent half a dozen nights working through documents by lamplight. The same table where Thomas had learned to dry dishes, and Lily had learned to stitch, and the whole shape of this household had been remade slowly and without ceremony into something that worked. He looked at her, the way he had been looking at her for weeks now, with that expression she had finally found a name for somewhere around the 2nd week of October. It was not gratitude. It was not admiration. It was recognition. The look of a man who has found the thing he did not know he was looking for and is still slightly astonished that it arrived in the form it did. It's not over, he said. But we're on the right side of it now. Yes, she said. We are. He picked up the letter and folded it carefully and put it in his shirt pocket right next to where she knew he kept Lily's handkerchief. He had kept that handkerchief there every day since the girl had pressed it into his hands the evening he came home from Billings, and Clara had never mentioned it, and he had never mentioned it, and it was the kind of thing that did not need to be mentioned. I'm going to tell the children, he said. Tell Thomas first, she said. He's been carrying this longer than Lily knows. He nodded. He went to find Thomas. She sat at the table for another moment. Then she got up and went back to work, because there was always work, and the work was the thing that had brought her here, and kept her here, and made her into something this household needed, and she was not going to stop doing it simply because one letter had arrived with good news in it. The news moved through Millhaven faster than Clara expected. By Saturday afternoon, 3 different people had stopped Ethan on the street in town, not to offer congratulations. Exactly more the particular Montana version of acknowledgement, which involves a nod and a few words, and a willingness to meet a man's eyes that had been absent in the weeks prior. The storekeeper's wife, who had watched Clara count coins with suspicious eyes 2 months ago, said good morning to her directly and meant it. These were small things. They were not nothing. The Reeves family came for Sunday supper, and it was Carl Reeves who said over the table, I owe this family an apology. I got scared and I made my fear into my boy's problem, and that wasn't right. He looked at Thomas. Billy told me what he said to you at school. A man shouldn't let his fear talk for him. Thomas looked at Carl Reeves with 9 years of careful judgment in his eyes and said, It's all right, Mr. Reeves. My pa gets scared too sometimes. People still do right in the end. Clara watched Ethan hear that and say nothing and pick up his fork, because some things a father feels about his son are too large for dinner-table conversation and need to be carried quietly. The 6 weeks before the hearing were not easy. Pryor was right about the pressure. Roy Marsh's lawyers filed 4 separate motions challenging different aspects of the evidence, and each one required a written response from Pryor and a period of waiting while the court considered it, and waiting was the part that cost the most. Clara noticed the way Ethan moved through those waiting periods, working harder than necessary, staying at the fence line past dark, doing with his hands what he could not do with the situation. She said nothing about it. She simply made sure there was food when he came in, and coffee when he sat down, and someone who looked at him without worry in her eyes, because he had enough worry of his own. Thomas started going to the fence line with his father in the evenings. Not because he was asked, just because he went, and Ethan let him come. and the two of them worked side by side in the last light in a silence that meant more than most conversations. Lily finished the second handkerchief. This one had a small flower alongside the letter, a daisy imperfect and entirely her own, and she gave it to Clara one morning without announcement, pressing it into her hand while passing through the kitchen and continuing out the door, as though she had simply handed her a kitchen cloth and it was nothing in particular. Clara held it for a long time. She folded it and put it in her dress pocket and kept it there. The twist came 3 days before the hearing, and it came from Margaret Caldwell. She arrived at the ranch alone, without her mare's usual imperious pace, riding slowly, stopping in the yard, sitting on her horse for a moment before she dismounted in the way someone dismounts when they are not sure of their welcome and are trying to decide if they deserve one. Clara saw her from the kitchen window and went to the door. Caldwell looked older than she had 3 weeks ago. Not physically, the posture was the same. The dark hair and the good coat and the quality of everything she wore were unchanged. But there was something behind her eyes that had not been there before. Something that looked, Clara thought, like a woman who has spent 3 weeks lying awake and has arrived at the end of a decision. "Is Ethan here?" Caldwell said. "He's at the barn," Clara said. "Do you want me to get him?" "In a minute." Caldwell stood in the yard holding her horse's reins, not quite looking at Clara. "I want to say something to you first." Clara waited. "I have known Ethan Walker for 15 years, Caldwell said. "I watched him build this ranch, and I watched him lose his wife, and I watched him try to keep going. When keeping going barely seemed possible." She paused. "I told myself what I was doing was practical, that the land would be better managed as part of a larger operation, that the marsh arrangement was simply business." She stopped again. "I was lying to myself." Clara said nothing. "I knew about the water diversion," Caldwell said. "Not when it was built. I was told it was flood remediation, and I believed it, or I let myself believe it, which is not the same thing. When I found out what it actually was, I chose not to ask what should be done about it." Her jaw tightened. "Because the water benefited my cattle, and because I had convinced myself that eventually Ethan would sell, and I would buy the land at a fair price, and it would be—" She stopped. "There is no version of this where what I did was acceptable." "No," Clara said. "There isn't." Caldwell looked at her directly now. "My lawyer has advised me to say nothing before the hearing. He is almost certainly right from a legal standpoint." She paused. "I came here anyway." "Why?" "Because those children were at my dinner table 3 times a year for the past 5 years, Caldwell said. "Because Lily Walker once told me I smelled like roses and meant it as the finest compliment she knew how to give. And I have been thinking about that for the past 3 weeks, and I cannot." She stopped. Her voice had not broken, but it had come close. "I cannot make what I did right. I understand that. But I am not going to go into that courtroom in 3 days and fight it." Clara was very still. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that my lawyer will be filing a statement of cooperation with the court tomorrow morning," Caldwell said. "I will be providing a full account of what I knew and when I knew it, and what I chose not to do about it, including the names of the people at the marsh bank who told me what was happening and when." She held Clara's gaze. "It will not be comfortable for me. It will, however, be the truth." Clara looked at her for a long moment. She thought about the day Caldwell had stood in this yard and told Lily that Clara was not her mother. She thought about the anonymous letter placed at the store counter. She thought about 4 years of stolen water and altered records and the patient, calculated dismantling of a family's security. She thought about what it costs a person to come and say what Caldwell had just said. "Ethan needs to hear this from you," Clara said. "Not from me." "I know," Caldwell said. Will you ask him to come out?" Clara went to the barn and found Ethan rehanging a stall door that had warped in the October cold. She said, "Margaret Caldwell is in the yard. You need to hear what she has to say." He looked at her. "Is this?" "Just come," she said. He came. He stood in the yard and listened to Caldwell say it again. All of it. The water diversion. The knowledge she had buried, the cooperation she was now offering. Clara watched his face through all of it. His jaw was tight at the beginning and the middle, and it did not loosen because nothing about what Caldwell was saying was easy to hear. But he listened. He let her finish. He did not interrupt once. When she was done, he was quiet for a long moment. "Why?" he said. "What changed?" Caldwell looked at him steadily. "That woman," she said, nodding toward Clara, "stood on this porch with your daughter and told me to leave, and your 7-year-old daughter told me to leave, and there was more dignity in the two of them than I have managed in the past 4 years." She paused. "I went home, and I sat with that for 3 weeks, and I could not. I could not make it into something I was willing to be." Ethan looked at her for a long time. "You should talk to Pryor," he said finally. "Before the hearing. He needs to know what you're going to say." "I know," she said. "I'll ride to Billings tomorrow." She left. Ethan stood in the yard after she was gone and did not speak for a moment. Then he said without turning around, "You knew she'd come." "No," Clara said. "I hoped." He turned. "You said something to her. The day she came here and you sent her away, you said something that she couldn't put down." "I told her the truth," Clara said. "That's all I ever do." He looked at her. The afternoon was still and cold, and the light was going amber and long across the yard, and he looked at her the way he had been looking at her for weeks, with that clear, certain recognition, and this time he did not redirect it to the next practical thing. "It's almost done," he said. "Almost," she said. "I said I was going to ask you something," he said. "When it was done." She looked at him. "I know it's not entirely done," he said. "There's still the hearing and whatever comes after, and I know nothing is certain yet. But I have been carrying what I want to say for 2 months now, and I find I am running out of good reasons to keep carrying it." He took a step toward her. "Clara Whitfield, you came here with one suitcase and no one waiting for you, and I told you in front of half this town that you weren't what I asked for, and you picked up your bag and walked past me and got to work. And everything that has happened since the children the ranch, all of it has been because you stayed when leaving would have been easier." She did not say anything. She was looking at him, and she was not redirecting, and she was not finding the next practical thing. "I am not a man who says things twice," he said, "so I want to say this once clearly." He looked at her straight on. "I love you. I have been in love with you since somewhere around the 3rd week of September, when I came in from the fence line and found you at the kitchen table, reading the county records at midnight, because you could not let yourself stop until you understood every piece of it. I love your stubbornness and your precision, and the way you press your hands flat on the table when you're thinking, and the way my daughter carries a piece of muslin in her pocket because of you, and the way my son nods like I do when he's made up his mind." He paused. "I want you to stay. Not as a hired hand. Not as a mail order arrangement. I want you to stay because this is your home, and because I would very much like to be the man who gets to stand beside you for the rest of his life, if you'll have me." The yard was very quiet. A horse moved in the paddock. Somewhere in the house, she could hear Lily saying something to Thomas, and Thomas answering the ordinary small sound of children being alive in a place that had learned how to be a home again. "You said you weren't going to say it twice," Clara said. "I'm not," he said. "I said it once. I'm waiting." She looked at him. She looked at everything she had built in this place, not the fence posts and the kitchen garden and the organized papers on the table, but the things underneath those things. The boy who pressed his hands flat the way she did. The girl with the daisy stitched beside the letter E. The man standing in front of her who had said "I love you." The same way he said everything that mattered plainly, without decoration, with the full weight of a person who means every word and knows what the words cost. She had spent her entire life being the person who was easy to leave behind, easy to underestimate, easy to dismiss. She had arrived in this valley with one suitcase and no one waiting, and a man who looked at her like an inconvenience, and a house that had forgotten how to be warm. She was not easy to dismiss anymore, and Ethan Walker was not a man who would ever try. "Yes," she said. He crossed the yard in 2 steps, and she did not step back, and his hands came up to her face, careful and certain and entirely decided. And he looked at her for one more moment, the way you look at something you have waited a long time to be sure of. Then he kissed her there in the yard of the Walker Ranch, in the long amber light of an October afternoon, and it was not dramatic or decorated or anything other than what it was. Two people who had come through something hard together, arriving finally at the other side. They heard Thomas before they saw him, the particular sound of a 9-year-old boy who has walked around the corner of the barn and stopped very suddenly. "Oh," Thomas said. Ethan straightened. He looked at his son. Thomas looked at Clara. He looked at his father. He looked back at Clara with his careful, direct, already decided eyes, and he said, "Does this mean you're staying?" "Yes," Clara said. "It means I'm staying." Thomas nodded. The firm single nod. Decision made, no need to revisit. "Good," he said, and walked back around the barn the way he had come, which was the most Thomas Walker thing he had ever done, and both of them heard him start whistling to himself about 10 steps later badly, and without apparent concern for the quality of it. Ethan put his hand over his eyes for a moment. His shoulders were shaking. Clara realized with something that moved warmly through her chest that she had never seen Ethan Walker laugh before. Not really. Not like this, helpless and unguarded and entirely without performance. It changed his whole face. It made him look younger and less carefully assembled and entirely himself. She laughed too. They stood in the yard and laughed together in the October light, and it was the best sound the Walker Ranch had heard in years. Lily appeared in the doorway of the house. She looked at her father and then at Clara, with the particular patience of a 7-year-old who has figured out what is going on and is waiting to see if the adults are going to say it out loud. "Are you getting married?" she said. "Yes," Ethan said. Lily looked at Clara. Clara looked back at her. "Okay," Lily said. She went back inside. The hearing was held on a Wednesday morning in the first week of November. Clara and Ethan rode to the county seat together with Pryor, meeting them at the courthouse steps with his saddlebag full of organized evidence, and the particular focused calm of a man who has done this many times and knows the difference between confidence and arrogance. Carl Reeves and the Bauer family were already there, standing together on the courthouse steps, with the slightly formal bearing of people who understand they are part of something larger than their own situation and are standing up to it. Judge Carter was a compact, gray-haired man who ran his courtroom with the efficient, no-nonsense pace of someone who has no patience for delay and considerable patience for truth. He listened to Pryor's presentation without interrupting. He asked 3 direct questions. He read the Caldwell cooperation statement, which Margaret Caldwell had delivered to Pryor in Billings 4 days before the hearing, with her lawyer present and her signature steady, and he read it carefully and set it down and asked one more question. Roy Marsh's lawyers argued for 2 hours. Carter listened to all of it. Then he set down his pen and looked out at the courtroom and said in the flat, certain tone of a man making a finding he has been confident about since the second page of the brief. The evidence presented to this court demonstrates a sustained and coordinated scheme of financial fraud, land rights manipulation, and deliberate resource interference, targeting landowners in Millhaven County over a period of at minimum 4 years. The court finds in favor of the plaintiffs on all primary counts. Clara felt Ethan's hand find hers under the table. She held it. The full accounting of what followed took months. There were hearings and restitution proceedings and the particular slow machinery of territorial law, working through the specific consequences for each person involved. Roy Marsh lost his bank charter. James Aldrich was removed from the county commissioner's board and faced criminal charges for the filing falsification. Robert Caldwell resigned from the savings and loan within a week of the verdict and left Millhaven before the snow came. Margaret Caldwell did not lose everything. Her cooperation statement had been full and truthful, and the court acknowledged it. She lost a portion of the Double C's eastern grazing rights, the portion that had been supplemented by diverted Walker water, and she paid restitution. That Ethan, at Clara's quiet suggestion, put directly into a fund for fence repair and pasture restoration. She stayed in Millhaven. She and Ethan were not friends. But the following spring, she stopped by the ranch with a cutting from a rose bush that had grown at her property for 30 years, and she handed it to Lily without a word and rode away. Lily planted it by the front porch. She tended it every morning without being asked. Earl Dodd served another 2 terms as county sheriff. He never mentioned the week he had misplaced a default notice in his coat pocket, and neither did anyone else. Ethan and Clara were married in December in the small church at the edge of Millhaven, with Carl Reeves standing up for Ethan and the Bauer family filling the first 2 rows, and Thomas in his good coat with his hair combed flat, and Lily in the dress that Clara had helped her sew their best work. Yet tiny stitches along the collar that Lily had done herself perfectly, even patient and strong. At the reception held in the church hall, because the December cold had no interest in accommodating outdoor celebrations. Thomas ate 3 pieces of cake and pretended he hadn't, and Lily sat next to Clara for most of the evening, with their shoulders touching, not saying much, not needing to. Billy Reeves came and shook Thomas's hand with the seriousness of 2 boys who have decided their friendship is worth more than adult complications and have moved on accordingly. Pryor made a toast that was short and precise, and said everything that needed to be said without flourish, because that was how he did everything, and Clara thought it was the best toast she had ever heard. Ethan held her hand through most of it, and when he didn't, he was close enough that she could feel the warmth of him without looking. That night, riding back to the ranch in the wagon with the children asleep between them, Thomas slumped against Ethan's arm. Lily tucked against Clara's side with the unself-conscious trust of a child who has decided where she belongs. Clara looked up at the Montana stars and thought about a woman who had left St. Louis with $4.30 and 1 suitcase, and a letter that was as close to a yes as she had been given in a long time. She had not known what she was coming to. She had known only that she was capable of the work and patient enough for the wait and stubborn enough to stay. That had been enough. Ethan looked at her over the children's sleeping heads. He did not say anything. He just looked at her the way he had been looking at her since the night they sat at the kitchen table until the lamp needed oil, and she looked back at him, and the wagon moved through the cold Montana dark toward the Walker Ranch, which was not struggling anymore, and was not empty anymore, and was not afraid anymore. The woman who had arrived as a stranger, whom no one had wanted, whom half the town had dismissed before she had finished unpacking her single bag, that woman had built something that could not be taken from her, not by fraud or rumors or the opinions of people who had not bothered to look. She had built a home. She had built a family. She had built herself into someone that this place needed, and that these people loved, and that no letter placed at a store counter, no whispered judgment in a dry goods aisle, no man reading her name on a piece of paper and saying she was not what he asked for could ever reach. And as the lights of the Walker Ranch came into view around the bend, the barn lamp burning the house standing solid against the winter dark, the repaired fence line running clean and true, along the west pasture, Clara Whitfield Walker straightened her back and held her daughter close, and let herself feel fully, and without reservation, what it meant to have stayed. This was home. She had made it so.